The instruments flickered blue across the control panel as I eased the Nautilus through the crushing darkness. 6,212 feet below the ocean's surface. The external pressure gauged at 275 atmospheres, enough to flatten a human body in seconds. My hands moved methodically over the controls, making minor adjustments to our position near the colossal whale carcass that dominated the submersible's forward viewport. Holding position at 60 m from the primary site, I said into my headset, my voice sounding too loud in the cramped cabin. Vertical descent complete. Beginning lateral approach to sampling zone A. Copy that, Logan. Sky's voice came through with surprising clarity despite the depth. Oceanographer confirms your position. All readings normal. I guided the submersible closer to the whale fall. An 80-foot blue whale skeleton now transformed into a deep-sea oasis. What had once been a magnificent animal was now a ghostly scaffold draped with red-tinted bacterial mats. Countless crustaceans skittered across bone surfaces that gleamed white in my external lights. The entire ecosystem pulsed with life that existed nowhere else on Earth. Remarkable preservation of the mandibular structure, I murmured, more to myself than to Sky. This specimen cannot be more than 8 months post-mortem, judging by the incomplete bone exposure on the posterior vertebrae. The Nautilus responded perfectly to each adjustment of the joystick, its thrusters whirring quietly as I positioned us near a section of exposed rib cage. This German-engineered vessel had become like an extension of my own body after 3 weeks of deep dives. A 20-feet titanium sphere trailing collection equipment, cameras, and scientific instruments, all controlled through my fingertips. I activated the external sampling arm, watching the mechanical appendage unfold through the viewport. The hydraulics hummed softly as I directed the claw toward a cluster of bone-eating Osedax worms that had colonized the whale's skeleton. Beginning collection at primary site, I reported. These Osedax colonies show unexpected diversification. I count at least 4 distinct morphotypes clustering on the same rib section. Can you get visual confirmation? Sky asked. The topside team is particularly interested in any new Osedax species. Camera 2 active, I responded, toggling the switch that would give the surface team a close-up view. Initiating sample extraction. I manipulated the joystick with practiced precision, feeling a familiar calm settle over me as I worked. This was why I endured the crushing isolation of deep-sea research. These moments of discovery, of touching the unknown. After 20 years of oceanographic work, the deep still held mysteries that made my heart race like a young graduate student again. I'd left the comforts of academic conferences and university laboratories behind for moments exactly like this, face to face with the undiscovered. The sampling claw closed gently around a cluster of the feathery Osedax, their red filaments waving in the current created by our thrusters. I carefully extracted the specimen, transferring it to one of the external collection containers. Sample 1 secured, I said, moving to the secondary collection point. I guided the Nautilus along the curved spine of the whale, marveling at the carpet of specialized scavengers that had claimed this bounty. Deep-sea isopods the size of dinner plates clung to patches of remaining blubber. Squat lobsters waved their claws defensively as our lights passed over them. The entire scene was a testament to nature's efficiency. Nothing wasted, everything transformed. Logan, we're getting unusual current readings in your sector, Sky said, a note of professional concern in her voice. Depth sensors show some turbulence about 30 m behind your position. I checked my instrument panel. No significant drift registered yet. Could be a deep water eddy forming. I'll keep an eye on it. As I turned my attention back to the sampling arm, something flickered at the edge of my vision, a shadow moving just beyond the reach of my external lights. I paused, my hand hovering over the controls. Sky, I might have company down here, I said, scanning the darkness beyond the illuminated area. Possibly a large marine mammal or shark. Sonar is not picking up anything substantial, she replied after a moment. Maybe some deep-water fish attracted to your lights. I wasn't convinced. 20 years of deep-sea work had taught me to trust my instincts. Whatever had moved through my peripheral vision was big, much larger than the typical scavengers drawn to a whale fall. I swiveled the external lights, trying to penetrate the inky blackness beyond. Continuing with collection protocol, I said, returning to the task at hand while maintaining awareness of my surroundings. Deep-sea predators were curious by nature, rarely aggressive towards something as foreign as a submersible. I was positioning the claw over a section of exposed vertebrae when it happened. Something massive slammed into the Nautilus from behind. The impact sent me lurching forward against my harness. The submersible spun violently, and I grasped the controls, fighting to stabilize our position as we spiraled away from the whale fall. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. External sensor damage, pressure variance, thruster misalignment. Mayday, mayday, I called, my training overriding the spike of adrenaline. Nautilus has sustained impact damage. Unknown origin, working to stabilize. Logan, Sky's voice carried equal parts professional concern and personal alarm. What happened? Your telemetry shows a 40 degrees roll and drift of 15 m. My fingers flew across the controls, firing the counter thrusters to halt our spin. The submersible shuddered, then gradually steadied as I fought against the momentum. Something hit us, I said, my voice level despite my racing heart. Hard impact on the aft section, not consistent with a current or underwater landslide. The Nautilus stabilized, hovering now about 50 m from the whale fall. I scanned my instruments, assessing the damage. Hull integrity remained within acceptable parameters, but several external sensors were offline, and one of the secondary lights had failed. I rotated the submersible slowly, sweeping the remaining lights through the surrounding water. That's when I saw it. At first, my brain refused to process what my eyes were witnessing. Circling just at the edge of visibility was a shark. But not just any shark. Its body profile was unmistakable, a silhouette that matched perfectly with the fossil reconstructions I'd studied throughout my career. Broad, flat head, triangular dorsal fin, massive, powerful tail. Sky, I said, keeping my voice deliberately steady. I have visual confirmation of what hit us. It's a shark species consistent with Otodus megalodon morphology. The silence from the surface lasted several seconds before Sky responded. Logan, that's not possible, she said firmly. Megalodons have been extinct for over 2 million years. I know what the textbooks say, I replied, tracking the creature as it circled just outside my light radius. But I'm looking at what appears to be a juvenile megalodon approximately 15 feet in length. The head morphology and fin structure are unmistakable. Could it be a large great white? Sky suggested, her tone shifting from dismissal to cautious inquiry. Maybe the depth and lighting are distorting your perception. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. Negative. I've observed hundreds of great whites. This is different. The proportions are consistent with Otodus, not Carcharodon. The creature completed another circuit, moving closer to the submersible. This time it passed directly through my light beam, giving me a clear view that confirmed my identification. The broad flat head, the massive gill slits, the distinctive shape of the pectoral fins. Everything matched the paleontological record. I'm sending video feed, I said, activating the external cameras. Look at the caudal fin ratio and the teeth configuration visible when it opens its mouth. That's no great white. As I spoke, the juvenile megalodon made another pass, this time deliberately scraping its body against the hull of the Nautilus. The submersible rocked slightly with the contact. I watched the creature's behavior with growing concern. What had started as curiosity was shifting into something more aggressive, a pattern I'd observed in other shark species when they transitioned from investigation to predation. Logan, the video quality is poor, but what I'm seeing, Sky's voice trailed off. The team is reviewing the footage now. Jorge wants you to initiate emergency ascent protocols. Jorge Chandler, captain of the oceanographer, was not a man who panicked easily. If he was calling for emergency ascent, the situation was serious. Negative on emergency ascent, I replied, watching the megalodon circle back toward me. Rapid vertical movement would likely trigger a predatory response. I need to maintain position until it loses interest. The shark completed another circuit, closer this time. Its dark eyes regarded the submersible with what I could only describe as predatory intelligence. In the harsh glare of my external lights, I could see the rows of serrated teeth visible behind its slightly parted jaws. Teeth designed to slice through the toughest hide and bone. Surface team still maintaining this is impossible, Sky said, her voice tight. But whatever it is, it's getting more aggressive. Telemetry shows it's circling closer with each pass. I was about to respond when the megalodon suddenly changed direction, disappearing from my field of vision. I swiveled in my seat, trying to locate it through the various viewports. Lost visual, I reported, scanning the darkness. No longer in forward or peripheral. The impact came with such force that I was thrown sideways against the interior wall of the cabin. Alarms blared as the Nautilus tumbled through the water. Red warning lights flashed across the control panel. Hull integrity compromised. External lighting failure. Pressure variance detected. I lunged for the stabilization controls, fighting to regain command of the submersible as it spun through the deep. The emergency protocols kicked in, shutting down non-essential systems and redirecting power to life support and thrusters. Mayday, mayday, I called into my headset. Significant impact damage. Hull breach possible. External lights offline. The emergency lighting system activated automatically, bathing the cabin in a dim red glow, while simultaneously triggering the external emergency floods. As the backup lights cut through the darkness outside, I saw it. The juvenile megalodon had positioned itself directly in front of the main viewport. Its massive jaws were open wide, revealing row upon row of serrated teeth, each the size of a man's hand. Even at a juvenile 15 feet, this creature was a perfect killing machine, unchanged by evolution for millions of years, because its design needed no improvement. The prehistoric predator hovered there for a moment, its dark eye fixing on me through the transparent barrier, a primeval hunter assessing its prey. Then, with a powerful sweep of its tail, it surged forward toward the damaged Nautilus, jaws open wide. I killed the engines. The soft mechanical hum faded to silence, leaving only the sound of my own breathing in the cramped cockpit. The Nautilus drifted, powerless now except for life support and communications. "What are you doing, Logan?" Jorge's voice crackled through the radio. "We're reading power reduction on our end." "Playing dead," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the massive juvenile circling outside my viewport. Predators often lose interest in non-moving targets. "That's not protocol," Jorge started. "With respect, Captain, there isn't a protocol for this situation." Amelia cut in from the background. I could picture her standing next to Jorge in the control room, tablet in hand. "Dr. Jacobs has extensive marine biology experience. It's a 15-footer, and it's just a juvenile," I added, trying to keep my voice steady. "If I can avoid triggering its predatory response." The rest of my sentence died in my throat as the shark changed course, turning sharply toward the Nautilus. Its dark eye rolled back protectively as it accelerated. No time to brace. No time to warn the surface team. The impact slammed me against my harness. Metal groaned around me. But worse was the sound that followed. A high-pitched crack that no deep-sea researcher ever wants to hear. I forced my eyes open, fighting the surge of panic. A thin line, no wider than a human hair, ran across the top right corner of my viewport. The specialized acrylic designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep had been compromised. "Hull integrity compromised," I reported, unable to tear my gaze from that tiny line. 6,000 feet below the surface, that hairline crack was a death sentence waiting to happen. "Impact damage to main viewport. I'm seeing stress fractures." A burst of activity came through the radio. Voices talking over each other. Orders being shouted. Then Jorge's voice, clear and commanding. "Alan is prepping the backup submersible now. 40 minutes until he reaches your position. 40 minutes. At this depth, with a compromised hull, that might as well be 40 days. "Understood," I said. The shark had circled back, moving with purpose now. Its massive tail propelled it through the water with surprising grace for something so powerful. "But I may not have 40 minutes, Captain." "What options do you have, Logan?" Sky's voice now, cutting through the chatter. Always practical, always focused on solutions. I scanned my control panel. Most systems were still operational, but the crack in the viewport was the immediate threat. If it spread, the sampling arm, I said, reaching for the controls. "It's still operational." "You're going to take samples at a time like this?" Jorge sounded incredulous. "No," I said, extending the mechanical arm outward. "I'm going to give our friend out there something else to think about." Through the viewport, I watched the sleek shape approach again. The shark wasn't swimming randomly anymore. It was hunting, testing the strange intruder in its domain. Megalodons hadn't survived for millions of years by being cautious. As it came in for another pass, I jabbed the sampling arm forward, aiming for the snout. Sharks have concentrated nerve endings there, even the prehistoric ones. A solid hit might drive it off. The sampling arm made contact. The shark flinched sideways. Exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. For a moment, I thought it would retreat. I was wrong. Instead of fleeing, the juvenile spun with impossible speed. Jaws wider than my torso opened, revealing rows of teeth that could shear through steel. Before I could retract the sampling arm, those jaws clamped down. Metal shrieked as the reinforced titanium arm was crushed between prehistoric teeth. With a violent shake of its massive head, the megalodon tore the entire assembly free. The submersible lurched. Warning lights flashed across every console. A new alarm joined the chorus, this one high-pitched and urgent. "Breach! Breach!" I called out, watching in horror as seawater began spraying into the cabin from where the sampling arm had been mounted. The stream was thin but steady, already pooling on the floor. Sampling arm assembly has been completely removed. Water ingress in progress. The cold reality of my situation settled over me. The Nautilus was built to withstand extreme pressure, but only when intact. With a breach, even a small one, it was just a matter of time. "Logan, listen to me," Jorge said, his voice tense but controlled. "Alan is moving as fast as he can, but he won't make it in time." I finished for him, watching the water levels slowly rising around my feet. More alarms activated as electrical systems began shorting out. The cabin lights flickered, then stabilized at half brightness. Emergency power. The temperature control died next, and I felt the first bite of the deep ocean chill seeping in with the water. "We need to get you out of there now," Sky said. "Forget waiting for Alan." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "Emergency ascent," Amelia cut in. "Drop all ballast. Full emergency thrust." I glanced at the depth gauge. 6,212 feet. An emergency ascent from this depth would mean shooting toward the surface at a speed that would almost certainly cause decompression sickness. The bends, potentially fatal at worst, crippling at best. "The pressure change would kill him," Jorge argued. "Staying put will definitely kill him," Sky countered. Water now covered my ankles, numbing cold seeping through my boots. The breach was widening as the pressure differential increased. I couldn't wait much longer. I reached for the emergency ballast release. A gamble with terrible odds, but better than certain death. Through the viewport, I saw the juvenile megalodon circling tighter now, agitated by the taste of metal and hydraulic fluid. It seemed ready for another attack. Then something changed. The shark suddenly jerked as if startled. Its sleek body twisted in the water, attention diverted from the Nautilus. Without warning, it darted away into the darkness beyond my lights, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. For one brief moment, I felt relief. That relief evaporated as the light around me seemed to dim. Not from inside the submersible. The emergency lights were still functioning. No, something outside was blocking the light that reflected back from the ocean floor. A shape rose from below, so vast it seemed impossible. As it moved into the range of my exterior lights, I saw it clearly for the first time. The juvenile had been 15 feet, impressive and terrifying in its own right. This creature dwarfed it completely. 80 feet, if it was an inch. Scarred gray skin stretched over a form virtually unchanged since the Pleistocene. The adult female moved with deliberate precision, her dorsal fin alone taller than a man. The juvenile hadn't fled out of fear. It had recognized its mother and given way to the apex predator. I sat frozen, watching as the colossal shape circled the damaged Nautilus. Even through the terror, the scientist in me marveled. Here was the ultimate evidence, the discovery of a lifetime. A living megalodon in its prime. A female large enough to have given birth to the juvenile that had attacked me. Logan, come in." Sky's voice seemed distant. "We're losing your telemetry. What's happening?" I couldn't tear my eyes from the window. The adult megalodon completed her circuit and positioned herself directly in front of the viewport. Her eye, black and ancient, fixed on me. Unlike the juvenile's frenzied attacks, there was a calculating intelligence here, the patience of an experienced hunter. "Mother," I whispered into the radio. The juvenile wasn't alone. I'm looking at an adult female megalodon approximately 80 feet in length. She's right outside. For a moment, silence from the radio, then Jorge's voice, uncharacteristically quiet. "God help you." The massive predator hung suspended in the water, her presence blocking out everything else. Where the juvenile had been all aggression and impulse, the mother was stillness and purpose. I knew with absolute certainty that my situation had transformed from desperate to impossible. The water continued rising inside the Nautilus, now halfway to my knees, but I barely noticed. All my attention was fixed on the prehistoric leviathan outside, watching me with the patient gaze of an apex predator that had survived extinction itself. I watched in shock as the matriarch's massive jaws opened with deliberate slowness. The juvenile, still circling the Nautilus with predatory intent, didn't notice its mother approaching from below until it was too late. In one explosive burst of movement, the massive jaws closed around the juvenile's midsection. The smaller shark's body went rigid, but surprisingly, there was no blood. The sheer size difference was mind-boggling. The 15-feet juvenile looked like a snack in the mother's mouth. Her head alone was nearly the size of my entire submersible. If the juvenile was impressive, this creature was beyond imagination. 80 feet of prehistoric perfection, unchanged by millions of years of evolution. The sudden movement created an underwater shockwave that slammed into the Nautilus with the force of a freight train. My body jerked against the restraints as the submersible spun violently. Warning klaxons blared through the cabin, joining the cacophony of alerts already screaming for my attention. The control panel erupted with more red indicators as backup systems failed under the stress. "Status," Jorge's voice crackled through the radio, barely audible above the alarms. I grabbed at the controls, trying to stabilize the spinning vessel. "Lost stabilizers," I managed to say between jolts. More water coming in. The sea was pouring through the breach faster now. What had been knee-deep moments ago was rapidly climbing toward my waist, bitingly cold against my skin. The salt water stung as it splashed against my face, tasting of copper and fear. The submersible finally stopped spinning, but now I was disoriented. Which way was up? The external cameras were offline, leaving me with only the viewport to see outside. The spotlights flickered erratically, casting strobing illumination across the most extraordinary scene I'd ever witnessed. The mother megalodon hung suspended in the water, her offspring still caught crosswise in her jaws. She wasn't crushing it, I realized. This wasn't a predatory attack, it was discipline. The thought seemed absurd, but there was no other explanation for the careful pressure she applied. Enough to restrain, but not to harm. The juvenile's tail thrashed weakly, but it had stopped fighting. After several seconds that felt like eternity, she opened her jaws and released the juvenile. The smaller shark hung motionless for a moment. Then, with a flick of its powerful tail, it shot away into the darkness beyond my lights. A clear dismissal, a command to leave. And then, incredibly, the matriarch turned directly toward me. The control room chatter in my headset faded to background noise as the giant shark approached the Nautilus with deliberate movements. Her size became even more apparent as she drew near. Her girth alone was wider than my submersible was long. One bite could crush the Nautilus like an empty soda can. She came to a stop just outside the viewport, so close that her snout was nearly touching the cracked acrylic. Then, with graceful precision, she positioned herself so that one massive eye aligned perfectly with my view. I stared directly into an eye the size of a dinner plate. It was black and ancient, with a depth of intelligence I'd never seen in any living creature. This wasn't the mindless killing machine of popular imagination. There was purpose behind that gaze. An alien consciousness studying me with the same curiosity with which I studied her. The eye blinked, a slow, deliberate closing and opening of a lid that seemed almost reptilian. I found myself holding my breath. This creature had survived from a time when humans didn't exist, a living fossil that had avoided detection by modern science. Her species had endured the catastrophe that killed the dinosaurs, the global changes of countless ice ages, and the hunting of prehistoric humans. We regarded each other across 20 million years of separate evolution. Predator and prey, perhaps, but in this moment, also two intelligent beings acknowledging each other's existence. Water sloshed around my waist, reminding me of my precarious situation. Yet I couldn't break away from that hypnotic gaze. The megalodon made no aggressive moves. She simply watched, assessed, considered. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the matriarch broke our connection. With a powerful, almost lazy sweep of her enormous tail, she turned away from the Nautilus. Her massive body gradually disappeared into the darkness beyond my failing lights. First her head, then her impossible length of body, and finally her tail, proportional yet still bigger than many full-grown sharks. "Logan! Logan, do you copy? Logan!" Amelia's frantic voice cut through my trance-like state, jolting me back to the dire reality of my situation. I blinked rapidly, trying to refocus on survival. "I'm here," I managed, my voice hoarse. "What's happening?" "We lost video feed completely. Alan is 25 minutes out." "Both sharks are gone," I interrupted, suddenly aware of how fast the water was rising. The juvenile attacked. Then a much larger adult, the mother, appeared and drove it away. "Did you say the mother?" Jorge's voice replaced Amelia's. "Affirmative. At least 80 feet long, but she's gone now." I checked the instruments that were still functioning. Cabins flooding rapidly. Hull, integrity, critical. Water's above my waist now and rising fast. There was a brief silence. Then Jorge's voice, calm but urgent. "Logan, listen carefully. Alan won't reach you in time. You need to initiate emergency ascent now." "The decompression," I started. "Is better than drowning," Jorge finished. "Pull the emergency ballast release. Jettison all external equipment. We'll have medical standing by for decompression issues." I knew he was right. The Nautilus wasn't designed for deep water rescue operations. It was a research vessel. Its hull could withstand incredible pressure but wasn't built to maintain integrity after structural damage. "Understood," I said, reaching for the bright red handle protected by a clear plastic cover. I flipped the cover up and wrapped my fingers around the cold metal. "Emergency ballast release in 3, 2, 1. I pulled the handle down with all my strength. The effect was immediate and violent. A series of controlled explosions severed the connection to all external ballast tanks and equipment. The sampling arms, external sensors, and auxiliary equipment, millions of dollars of specialized technology dropped away into the abyss. Suddenly, thousands of pounds lighter, the Nautilus lurched upward with such force that I was slammed down into my seat. The pressure gauge began counting upward at an alarming rate. 12 feet per second. Too fast. Way too fast. The human body isn't designed to handle rapid pressure changes. Coming up too quickly from even recreational diving depths can cause decompression sickness. From over 6,000 feet, at this ascent rate, it was practically a death sentence. The pain hit almost immediately. It began as a tingling sensation in my fingers and toes, quickly intensifying to what felt like tiny bubbles forming under my skin. Nitrogen coming out of solution in my blood and tissues as the external pressure decreased. Within seconds, the tingling transformed into agony. My joints felt like they were filled with broken glass. Each microscopic bubble, a razor slicing through capillaries and nerve endings. I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. "Logan, report status." Jorge's voice seemed distant through the haze of pain. "Ascending," I managed to gasp. 12 feet per second. Depth reading. I forced my eyes to focus on the gauge. 5,800. My vision blurred, then cleared, then blurred again. The bends, decompression sickness, was already affecting my central nervous system. I knew the textbook symptoms: joint pain, dizziness, fatigue, nausea, paralysis, and eventually, if severe enough, death. I was checking those boxes one by one. The cabin continued flooding. The crack in the viewport had widened, spiderwebbing across the thick acrylic. Each foot of ascent reduced the external pressure, increasing the strain on the already compromised hull. Physics was working against me. The faster I rose, the greater the pressure differential between the inside and outside of the Nautilus, putting more stress on the damaged areas. Water now reached my chest, frigid and stinging with salt. The electrical system started shorting out, causing the lights to flicker ominously. 5,000 feet, I reported, fighting to keep my voice steady. The pain was becoming unbearable, radiating from my joints through my entire body. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were floating above myself, watching this nightmare unfold. "Stay with us, Logan," Sky's voice cut in. "Medical team is prepping the chamber, just hold on." The hyperbaric chamber. If when I reached the surface, they'd need to get me into a decompression chamber immediately to slowly reacclimate my body to surface pressure. But that assumed I'd reach the surface alive. 4,200, I said, though I wasn't sure if I'd spoken aloud or just thought the numbers. The control panel sparked as seawater reached some of the lower electrical systems. I was grateful for the redundant sealed emergency systems that kept the ballast controls and depth gauge functioning. A particularly sharp bolt of pain lanced through my skull, and my vision went completely black for several terrifying seconds. When it returned, it was tunneled in gray around the edges. Not good. My body was beginning to shut down. "Logan, what's your depth?" Jorge's voice sounded concerned. Had I been silent too long? I forced myself to focus on the gauge. 3,600. Water chest high. Each breath was a struggle now. Not just from the pain, but from the practical challenge of keeping my head above water in the rapidly flooding cabin. I unstrapped from the pilot's seat, needing the freedom to stand as the water rose. The motion sent fresh waves of agony through my limbs. The ascent continued at its breakneck pace. 3,000 feet, 2,000, 500, 2,000. The Nautilus groaned around me, the metal hull protesting the rapid pressure changes. I worried that if the viewport failed completely, the inrush of water would be immediate and fatal. 1,500, I reported mechanically, my voice slurred. The pain had reached a plateau of sorts, still excruciating, but no longer increasing. Or perhaps my nervous system had simply given up on reporting new pain signals. My thoughts were becoming disjointed, harder to track. The water had reached my shoulders now. I stood on tiptoes on the pilot's seat, keeping my head in the shrinking air pocket at the top of the cabin. The radio still functioned, waterproofed for exactly this kind of emergency. 1,000 feet, I said. Almost there. The truth was more complicated. The ocean surface was getting closer, but so was the possibility of total viewport failure. The crack had expanded across the entire pane, with seawater spraying through in thin jets that added to the rising flood. I was in a race against physics and biology. The nitrogen bubbles in my bloodstream, the failing hull integrity, the rising water all working against me. The pressure gauge continued its steady climb. 800 feet, 700, 600. The radio crackled with voices. Jorge, Sky, Amelia. But their words blurred together into meaningless noise. I focused solely on the depth gauge, watching the numbers tick downward. 500. Subai. Sambai. A new sound rose above the alarms and radio chatter. A high-pitched, crystalline tone that grew in intensity. The viewport was about to give way completely. 200 feet. The water was at my chin now. 150 feet. I took a deep breath and held it as the water covered my head completely. 100 feet. The darkness was almost peaceful compared to the chaos of alarms and voices. 50 feet. My lungs burned for air. 25 feet. The Nautilus broke the surface with enough force to send me crashing against the ceiling. The impact forced the last of the air from my lungs, and I involuntarily inhaled seawater. The viewport finally surrendered to the pressure differential, imploding inward in a shower of acrylic shards and rushing water. But it no longer mattered. We had reached the surface. The emergency hatch, designed to open automatically upon surfacing, did exactly that. Sunlight and air poured in, along with the shouts of the rescue team already positioned nearby. I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me from the flooded cabin. As they dragged me onto the deck of the research vessel, my body convulsed, expelling seawater from my lungs. Through the fog of pain and oxygen deprivation, one thought remained clear. I had seen something no human had ever documented and lived to tell about. The mother megalodon's eye, ancient and intelligent, would remain burned into my memory if I survived the next few hours. The medical team worked frantically around me, strapping an oxygen mask to my face and loading me onto a stretcher. My body felt distant, disconnected from my mind by the excruciating pain of the bends. Every movement was agony as they rushed me toward the ship's hyperbaric chamber. I heard Sky's voice nearby, urgent and worried, but I couldn't make out her words. The world narrowed to a bright point, then expanded again in waves of pain. My last conscious thought was the realization that I had indeed reached the surface before the Nautilus had completely failed. But that might not be enough to save me from what my body had endured during the ascent. I broke the surface in a haze of pain. 30 minutes of emergency ascent had turned my body into a battlefield as nitrogen bubbles formed in my bloodstream, joints, and tissues. Each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. The bright daylight assaulted my eyes after the darkness of the deep, but I couldn't even raise a hand to shield them. "Got him! Over here!" Hands grabbed at my shoulders and under my arms. Alan Thomas and Nicole Ramsey pulled me from the half-submerged Nautilus onto the ship's deck. My saturated clothes added weight to my already leaden limbs. The submersible gurgled behind me, water filling its compromised hull even as it bobbed at the surface. "Jesus, he's in bad shape," Nicole said, her voice sounding distant and warped through my pain. I tried to speak but produced only a groan. My joints felt like they were being torn apart from within. Every movement amplified the agony. The Ben's decompression sickness was tearing through my system after the emergency ascent. Alan's face appeared above me, brows furrowed with concern. "Try not to move, Logan. Mason's coming." I heard running footsteps, and then Mason Sanchez was kneeling beside me, medical bag in hand, his fingers pressed against my neck, checking my pulse. "Rapid and thready," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He pulled an oxygen mask from his bag and placed it over my face. "Deep breaths if you can manage it." The cool flow of oxygen provided minimal relief. Mason pulled back my eyelids, checking my pupils with a penlight. The brightness sent new lances of pain through my skull. "Classic presentation of severe DCS," Mason said to someone I couldn't see. "We need to get him to the chamber immediately." I grabbed his wrist with what little strength I could muster. My vision swam, but I fought to focus. "The footage!" I gasped through the mask. "Camera footage." Mason tried to gently disengage my grip. "Logan, your condition is critical. We need to—" "No." I tightened my fingers around his wrist. "Need the evidence." Amelia appeared at the edge of my vision, her face tight with worry. "The external camera data, I'll handle it personally, Logan. I promise. The drives are being retrieved now." I held her gaze, needing her to understand. "Both of them," I whispered. "The juvenile and the mother." Amelia nodded. "We'll secure everything right now. You need to let Mason help you." I released my grip on Mason's wrist and let my arm fall back to the deck. The relief of knowing the footage would be saved allowed me to surrender to the medical urgency. Mason and 2 crew members I didn't recognize lifted me onto a stretcher. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through my body. I bit down on a scream. "Moving you is going to hurt," Mason warned. "But every minute counts now." They carried me across the deck toward the ship's medical bay. The motion of the ship amplified my suffering. I fixed my gaze on the blue sky above, trying to detach my mind from the pain racking my body. It didn't work. The medical bay doors swung open. They transferred me from the stretcher onto an examination table, where Mason cut away my wet clothes with medical scissors. My skin was mottled with patches of redness, another symptom of the bends. Mason worked methodically, attaching monitors to track my vital signs while preparing the hyperbaric chamber. "BP dropping," one of the assistants reported. "Pulse ox at 89. Mason nodded grimly. "Let's get him in now. No time for anything else." They moved me again, sliding me into the narrow confines of the ship's hyperbaric chamber. The clear acrylic door sealed with a hiss of pressure. Mason adjusted controls on the exterior panel, and I heard the subtle change in air pressure as the chamber began to work. "We're taking you to treatment depth, Logan," Mason said through the intercom. "It's going to take time, but this is your best chance. Try to relax if you can." Relax. As if that were possible. My body felt like it was being crushed and torn apart simultaneously. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing through the oxygen mask that remained strapped to my face. Time became fluid. I opened my eyes periodically, watching the activity in the medical bay through the chamber's viewport. Mason remained nearby, monitoring my vitals on the displays. Other crew members came and went, their faces showing varying degrees of concern. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when Amelia returned. She approached the chamber carrying a tablet. She held it up for me to see. The screen showed a paused image from the Nautilus's external camera. Even in my compromised state, I recognized the massive form of the matriarch megalodon. "We've got it all," she said, her voice coming through the chamber's communication system. "Every second is captured. It's Logan. It's extraordinary." I managed a weak nod. The pain had receded to merely excruciating rather than unbearable. Mason adjusted something on the chamber controls, and fresh oxygen flowed through my mask. "His vitals are stabilizing," Mason reported to Amelia. "But he's not out of danger yet. This is going to be a long treatment." The medical bay doors opened again, and Jorge Chandler strode in. The captain's usual composure was fractured by lines of tension around his eyes and mouth. He spoke briefly with Mason, glancing repeatedly at me through the chamber window. "Logan," Jorge said finally, leaning toward the intercom, "we're making full speed for San Diego. ETA is 14 hours. The Coast Guard has been alerted to have medical transport standing by." I tried to respond, but could only manage another nod. "There's something else," Jorge continued, his expression grave. "Dr. Paday is on video conference. He's been informed of the situation. Travis. Of course they'd contact him. The discovery was too significant to keep within our immediate team." I blinked slowly, acknowledging the information. Jorge stepped away from the chamber, moving to a wall-mounted screen I could partially see from my position. Travis's familiar wild silver hair appeared on the display. Their conversation was mostly inaudible to me, but their body language told me enough. Jorge's rigid posture, the way he repeatedly ran a hand through his hair, and Travis's animated gestures all suggested intense discussion about what had happened and what should happen next. This wasn't just about scientific discovery anymore. We had evidence of a living prehistoric apex predator, a species with the potential to disrupt marine ecosystems and human oceanic activities alike. Amelia approached the chamber again, showing me more images on her tablet. She cycled through several screenshots from the footage, each showing different angles of the megalodons. Even through my pain, I felt a surge of scientific excitement. The evidence was undeniable. I watched her face as she showed me the images. Her expression shifted from professional interest to open shock when she reached what must have been the footage of the matriarch disciplining the juvenile. Her eyes widened, and she looked from the tablet to me with newfound understanding. "You were right," she said. "It wasn't attacking the juvenile, it was correcting its behavior." She shook her head in amazement. "This changes everything we thought we knew about prehistoric marine predator behavior." The pressure in the chamber continued to increase gradually, forcing nitrogen back into solution in my bloodstream. The process was working, but too slowly to provide immediate relief. I drifted in and out of awareness, the pain ebbing and flowing like tides. During one period of lucidity, I noticed the medical bay had filled with more people. Sky stood with Jorge and Amelia, all three huddled around a laptop reviewing footage. Sky's hands covered her mouth in astonishment at whatever they were watching. Jorge was on a satellite phone, his expression grim as he paced the limited space. The ship's engines thrummed beneath us, pushing us towards San Diego at maximum speed. Each vibration sent renewed jolts of pain through my joints, but I welcomed it. Every mile brought us closer to a full-size hyperbaric facility where my treatment could be completed properly. As consciousness slipped away again, my mind returned to the moment underwater, that profound instant when the matriarch megalodon had paused at the viewport. Her ancient eye had locked with mine, black and depthless, yet unmistakably aware. That eye had watched the rise and fall of countless species. It had witnessed the changing of oceans and the evolution of the planet itself, and for one brief moment, it had acknowledged me. I woke to find Sky sitting beside the chamber, her hand pressed against the clear barrier as if trying to reach through to me. When she saw my eyes open, relief washed across her face. "Hey, you're back," she said, voice slightly distorted through the intercom. "Mason says your stats are improving." I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. Sky seemed to understand. "Don't try to talk yet. Save your strength. She glanced over her shoulder, then back to me. The footage is incredible, Logan. We've been analyzing it frame by frame. The morphological details match every theoretical model we've ever developed for Ototus megalodon. But seeing it alive, watching it move, she shook her head in wonder. It's beyond anything we could have imagined. I managed to mouth the word size through the oxygen mask. The matriarch is approximately 82 feet, Sky confirmed. The juvenile about 15. Exactly as you reported. I closed my eyes briefly, letting that sink in. Not a hallucination or misidentification. Real megalodons, confirmed by multiple witnesses and camera footage. When I opened my eyes again, Mason was checking the chamber controls. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Blink once for worse, twice for the same, 3 times for better." I blinked 3 times, though better was relative. The pain had subsided to a dull, persistent ache, rather than the sharp agony of before. "Good," Mason said. "We're at treatment depth now. You'll need to stay here until we reach port, then transfer to a hospital facility to complete the protocol." I drifted away again, my consciousness coming and going like radio signals during a storm. Each time I surfaced from the darkness, the scenes around me had changed. Sometimes Sky was there, sometimes Jorge or Amelia. Once I opened my eyes to find the medical bay empty except for Mason, who sat quietly monitoring the equipment. But no matter how many times I slipped in and out of consciousness, one image remained constant in my mind. The matriarch's eye, that ancient orb of awareness staring at me through millions of years of evolutionary history. I had connected, however briefly, with a creature that by all scientific accounts should not exist. What did it mean for our understanding of ocean ecosystems? For the fossil record and evolutionary timelines we had constructed with such certainty, my scientific mind raced with implications even as my body fought to heal. The next time I woke, I felt clearer than I had since before the ascent. Mason noticed immediately. "Welcome back," he said, approaching the chamber. "Your color's better. How's the pain?" I removed the oxygen mask slightly. "Manageable," I rasped. Mason nodded, satisfied. "We're about an hour out from San Diego. You've been in treatment for nearly 13 hours. 13 hours? I had lost more time than I realized. "The footage?" I asked. "Secure," Mason assured me. "Amelia's made multiple backups. Nothing's been lost." I replaced the mask and took several deep breaths before asking my next question. "What happens when we dock?" Mason's expression turned guarded. "That's complicated." He glanced toward the door, then back at me. "Jorge's been on calls with the university administration and NOAA, and apparently some government officials too. The calls haven't all been friendly." "What kind of government officials?" "NOAA, Department of Defense, someone from the National Security Council," Mason said quietly. "Jorge says they're already waiting at the hospital. They've requested, demanded, actually complete confidentiality from everyone involved." This wasn't surprising, but it still sent a wave of unease through me. Scientific discoveries weren't supposed to be immediately classified, especially not ones of this magnitude. "They can't suppress this," I said. "It's too important." Mason shrugged helplessly. "I'm just telling you what I know. Jorge has been fighting for scientific access, but there are national security arguments being made." He checked my vitals on the monitor. "Your job right now is to focus on recovery. Let Jorge and Travis handle the politics." I nodded, though frustration burned alongside the pain in my body. The chamber felt increasingly confining as my mind cleared. I had spent a career pursuing knowledge that could be shared with the scientific community, not hidden away in government facilities. The medical bay door opened, and Sky entered carrying a fresh tablet. She smiled when she saw I was awake. "Good timing," she said, approaching the chamber. "I wanted to show you something before we dock." She held the tablet up to the viewport. On screen was a close-up still of the matriarch's eye, the exact moment that had been replaying in my mind. The ancient eye filled the frame, black and unfathomable, yet undeniably intelligent. "I pulled this from the footage," Sky said. I thought you should have it." "Thank you," I whispered, staring at the image. Even in a still photograph, there was something profound about that gaze. "There's more," Sky continued, swiping to another image. This one showed a wider angle of the matriarch, with measurements and annotations overlaid on her massive form. We've been able to confirm not just the species, but specific anatomical details that were previously theoretical. Her caudal fin structure, the jaw musculature, it's all there, Logan. Everything we hypothesized from fossil records, but could never verify. I studied the annotations, professional excitement momentarily overriding my physical discomfort. The gill structure, I noted. It matches the 2019 modeling. Skye nodded eagerly. Exactly. And look at the dermal denticles. She froze mid-sentence as the ship's engines changed pitch. We must be approaching the harbor. Mason checked his watch. Right on schedule. The ambulance should be waiting at the dock. The medical bay door opened again, and Jorge entered. His expression was grave, but he managed a small smile when he saw I was conscious. "Good to see you alert, Logan," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been put through a trash compactor, but I'll live," I replied. "Mason tells me we have a welcoming committee." Jorge's smile faded. "Yes, more extensive than I'd anticipated. There are representatives from multiple agencies waiting, along with medical transport." He moved closer to the chamber. "I've been on calls throughout the journey. The situation is complex. They want to bury it," I said. It wasn't a question. Jorge didn't deny it. "There are concerns about public reaction, about commercial fishing operations, even about national security implications if these creatures are confirmed to exist in U.S. waters. They can't just pretend we didn't see what we saw," I argued. "The scientific community has a right to know." "I agree," Jorge said firmly. "So does Travis. He's been making calls to colleagues with influence, but for now, we've been instructed to limit all information to those who already know." He glanced at Skye. "That includes the footage." Skye clutched the tablet tighter. "This is wrong. We're scientists, not government agents." "I'm not happy about it either," Jorge said. "But we need to play this carefully. If we rush to publish or leak information, we could lose all access to the data and any future research opportunities." He looked back at me. "Logan, you'll be taken directly to Naval Medical Center. I've been told they have a hyperbaric treatment facility there." I felt the slight change in the ship's motion as we entered the harbor. The decrease in speed and the different pattern of the waves told me we were close to docking. My time in the relative privacy of the ship's medical bay was nearly over. "What about further expeditions?" I asked. "We need to go back, study them properly." Jorge and Skye exchanged glances. "That's part of what's being discussed," Jorge said carefully. "There's interest in a follow-up mission, but under different parameters. Military supervision," I translated bitterly. Jorge didn't confirm or deny, which was confirmation enough. Mason interrupted, checking a message on his phone. "Ambulance is confirmed dockside. We'll begin transfer procedures as soon as we're secured." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. The ship docked, and medical personnel came aboard to prepare me for transfer. The hyperbaric chamber couldn't be moved whole, so a complex procedure began to safely transition me to a portable unit for transport to the hospital. Through it all, my mind kept returning to the implications of what we'd discovered. This wasn't just about finding a living specimen of an extinct species. It was about rewriting our understanding of oceanic evolution, about challenging the very foundations of marine paleontology. If megalodons had survived, what other presumed extinct species might still exist in the unexplored depths? And beyond the scientific implications were the practical ones. How would commercial fishing operations be affected? What about naval operations, underwater cable installation, oil exploration? The potential ramifications extended into economics, international relations, and environmental policy. As they prepared to wheel me off the ship, Skye leaned down close to my ear. "We'll fight for this, Logan," she whispered, "whatever it takes. This discovery belongs to science, not bureaucrats." I managed a weak smile as they rolled me toward the waiting ambulance. Through the portable chamber's viewport, I caught glimpses of unfamiliar faces watching from the dock. Stern men and women in dark suits standing apart from the medical team. Government representatives, no doubt, already working to contain the situation. The ambulance doors closed behind me, sealing me away from my colleagues and the ship that had carried us through this extraordinary discovery. As we pulled away from the dock, I closed my eyes. the image of the matriarch's gaze still vivid in my mind. We had made eye contact across millions of years of evolution, two species that were never meant to meet. Whatever happened next, whether the discovery was shared with the world or buried in classified reports, that moment of connection could never be taken from me. I had seen something no other human in recorded history had seen, a living megalodon, and that creature, in turn, had seen me. The discovery would have implications far beyond scientific interest. I knew that now, with complete certainty. But as the ambulance sped toward the hospital and the waiting government officials, one thought sustained me through the pain and uncertainty. The truth had a way of surfacing, just like the ancient predator from the depths. Some discoveries were simply too significant to remain hidden forever. 3 days in a hospital bed gave me too much time to think. The doctors had stabilized my condition, oxygen saturation increasing, joint pain subsiding, but my mind refused similar treatment. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. 80 feet of prehistoric perfection, suspended in the deep blue. That ancient eye studying me with unmistakable intelligence. The San Diego Maritime Medical Center specialized in treating divers with decompression sickness. My room resembled standard hospital accommodations with one key difference. A monitoring station tracked my oxygen levels and tissue healing from the rapid ascent. The medical team had moved me from the portable hyperbaric chamber to a larger treatment unit upon arrival, where I'd spent the first 36 hours in pressurized isolation. Now I was stable enough for visitors, though visitors hardly described the crowd assembling in my room. I counted 11 people jammed into the small space. 3 wore naval uniforms, 4 had government badges hanging from lanyards, and the rest carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence services. Skye stood near the window, arms crossed, while Jorge occupied a corner by the door. Travis Paydet had positioned himself at the foot of my bed, his wild silver hair more disheveled than usual as he gestured emphatically at a laptop screen. "The footage is unquestionably authentic," Travis said, his British accent more pronounced when he got excited. "No digital artifacts, no signs of manipulation. We're looking at 2 living, breathing megalodon sharks. A juvenile, approximately 15 feet in length, and an adult female, I estimated at 80 feet. A man in a charcoal suit who'd introduced himself as Daniel Werner from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration leaned forward. "Dr. Paydet, with all due respect, the scientific consensus has maintained that Carcharocles megalodon went extinct 3.6 million years ago. And the scientific consensus once held that coelacanths were extinct for 65 million years, until a fisherman pulled one up in 1938, Travis countered, tapping the screen. "The evidence is right here." The room fell silent as the footage played. From my hospital bed, I watched the external camera recording from the Nautilus, the juvenile circling, the sudden appearance of the matriarch, the moment she took the smaller shark in her jaws. My breath caught watching it again, remembering the pressure of water rising around me as the submersible failed. A woman in a Navy uniform with commander's insignia spoke next. "Dr. Jacobs, we'd like to hear your first-hand account of the encounter." I adjusted myself against the pillows, wincing as pain flared through my shoulders. The nurse had warned me that the effects of decompression sickness would linger for weeks. I was conducting a standard sampling operation at the whale fall site. I began, keeping my voice steady, despite the discomfort. We'd been tracking the decomposition of a blue whale carcass at that depth for our research on deep-sea ecosystems. I noticed unusual movement beyond the range of the external lights, too large for typical deep-water species in that region. I described the juvenile's initial appearance, its curiosity turning aggressive as it investigated the Nautilus. The faces around me remained impassive, but I noted how several officials exchanged glances when I detailed the damage to the submersible. Then came the moment that changed everything, I continued. The juvenile suddenly darted away, and the matriarch appeared from below. Her size was, it's difficult to convey the scale without seeing her. The largest great white sharks max out around 20 feet. This creature was 4 times that length. "And you're certain of this measurement?" asked a man who'd identified himself as representing the Department of Defense. "The Nautilus has calibrated external reference points, specifically for size estimation," I replied. But even without instruments, the proportions were unmistakable. What you're seeing in that footage isn't digital manipulation or mistaken perspective. It's a living megalodon. A murmur passed through the assembled officials. I noticed Skye shifting uncomfortably by the window, her expression tense. We'd discussed this moment during her hospital visits over the past 3 days, the inevitable government interest, the questions about what we'd found. Werner from NOAA spoke again. Dr. Jacobs, I believe you understand the significance of what you're claiming. If confirmed, this would be the most important marine biology discovery of the century. Of several centuries, Travis interjected. Imagine finding a living T-Rex, which is precisely why we need to discuss containment protocols, said a thin woman with steel gray hair who had yet to identify herself or her agency. This information cannot simply be released to the public. And there it was, the first mention of suppression. I'd expected it from the moment we surfaced. Containment. Skye stepped forward from her position by the window. We're talking about a scientific discovery, not a security breach. The woman fixed Skye with a cold stare. A discovery with significant national security implications. Uncontrolled release of this information could cause panic, disrupt shipping lanes, devastate coastal tourism, not to mention the international complications. We're scientists, not politicians, Travis responded. Our obligation is to the scientific community. Your obligation, the DoD representative cut in, includes consideration of public welfare and national interests. Dr. Jacobs signed standard research protocols when accepting government funding that specifically address exceptional discoveries. I remembered those documents, pages of legal language I'd skimmed through while focusing on the research parameters. Standard bureaucracy, I'd thought at the time. The debate intensified, with officials arguing between themselves about jurisdiction and protocol. I caught fragments of their concerns: ecological impact assessments, threat analysis, international maritime law. Through it all, Jorge remained silent in the corner, his expression unreadable. What we need, Werner from NOAA finally said, raising his voice above the others, is a balanced approach. A controlled scientific announcement with appropriate context and assurances. Absolutely not, the unnamed woman countered. Full classification until we've assessed all implications. Jorge finally stepped forward from his position by the door. There's a more immediate concern none of you are addressing. All eyes turned to him. We have a massive predator capable of attacking vessels in international waters. This isn't just about scientific papers or public reactions, it's about preventing casualties. My stomach tightened at his next words. We need to neutralize the threat. No. The word escaped me before I could moderate my tone. The room fell silent as everyone turned toward my hospital bed. That's not the answer. Jorge's expression hardened. With all due respect, Dr. Jacobs, you nearly died down there. If that creature decides to attack a passenger ship or a submarine, but she didn't attack me, I interrupted, struggling to sit up straighter. She could have destroyed the Nautilus completely, but she didn't. What we witnessed wasn't blind aggression. It was intelligence, purpose. You're anthropomorphizing a shark, Jorge said. I'm reporting what I observed, I countered. The matriarch was disciplining the juvenile, teaching it. She recognized the Nautilus as an unfamiliar entity, assessed it, made eye contact with me, and then deliberately swam away. The Navy commander leaned forward. Made eye contact? You're suggesting the shark recognized you as another intelligent being? I'm stating that what I observed goes beyond instinctive predatory behavior. This animal exhibited decision-making capabilities we've previously only documented in marine mammals and certain cephalopods. The DoD representative scoffed. So we should leave a prehistoric apex predator roaming free because you think it showed restraint once? I think we should study it, I insisted. Learn from it. This creature has survived unchanged for millions of years. The scientific value is incalculable. The exact coordinates of the encounter, the unidentified woman said, changing tactics. We'll need those immediately. I hesitated, suddenly aware of the implications of sharing that information. The whale fall site was remote but not inaccessible. With precise coordinates, they could dispatch vessels, research, or military within days. Those coordinates are part of our research data, Skye interjected. Protected under our grant agreement until publication. The woman's eyes narrowed. National security supersedes academic protocols, Miss Wong. Dr. Wong, Sky corrected coldly. The DoD representative stepped closer to my bed. Dr. Jacobs, perhaps you don't fully appreciate the situation. We have confirmed evidence of prehistoric apex predators in international waters where U.S. Navy exercises routinely take place. Submarines, aircraft carriers, special operations training, all potentially at risk. This isn't just a scientific curiosity. It's a national security matter. The room erupted again, voices overlapping as different agencies staked their claims to the discovery. NOAA wanted environmental assessment rights. The Navy insisted on threat mitigation protocols. Someone mentioned the State Department needing to be informed due to international waters considerations. Through the cacophony, I caught Travis looking at me, his expression shifting from academic excitement to something more serious. He cleared his throat loudly, silencing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, straightening his rumpled tweed jacket, "I've spent 40 years studying marine predators. I wrote the textbook many of you referenced in your education, and I'm telling you that what we have here is not a problem to solve, but an opportunity to learn." He walked to the laptop and replayed a section of footage showing the matriarch's careful handling of the juvenile. "Look at this behavior," he continued. "Controlled, purposeful, nuanced. This isn't simple predation. It's complex social interaction. If we approach this with military solutions rather than scientific inquiry, we lose perhaps the most important opportunity for understanding marine evolutionary history that we've ever encountered." I felt a surge of gratitude toward Travis. Despite our occasional professional disagreements, he recognized the true value of what we'd discovered. The debate continued for another hour, circular and increasingly tense. My pain medication was wearing off, making it harder to focus on the arguments bouncing around the room. The question of the exact coordinates came up repeatedly, with increasing pressure from multiple officials. Eventually, a nurse interrupted, insisting that I needed rest. The officials began gathering their materials, though their expressions made clear this discussion was far from over. As they filed out, Amelia approached my bed under the pretense of adjusting my monitors. While checking the equipment, she slipped a folded piece of paper beneath my hand, her expression neutral but her eyes conveying urgency. "Your readings are improving, Dr. Jacobs," she said loudly enough for the lingering officials to hear. "Try to get some rest now." Only after the last of them had departed, leaving just Sky in the room, did I unfold the note. The message was brief but clear. "Backup copies of all footage secured in 3 locations. They can take the originals." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Whatever happened next, the evidence was safe. The truth about what we'd discovered wouldn't disappear, even if they tried to make it vanish. I folded the note, slipping it into my hand. The knowledge of those backup copies spread through me like a slow tide of relief. We had insurance against whatever these officials planned. "You need to rest now," Sky said, her voice gentler than it had been during the confrontation with the government team. "I'll stay for a bit." But rest wasn't coming. Not with what I'd heard about their containment protocols. Not with the way the Department of Defense representative had looked at the footage, like he was assessing a target rather than witnessing a scientific miracle. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside me, tracking my oxygen saturation and tissue healing. Better than 6 hours ago, but still far from normal. My joints ached less intensely now, but moving still sent sharp pains through my shoulders and knees. Classic symptoms of the bends that wouldn't fully resolve for days. "They're going to kill them," I said after the door closed. Sky sat in the chair beside the bed. "We don't know that for sure. You heard what they said." The DoD guy practically had torpedo schematics ready. I adjusted myself on the bed, wincing at the pressure in my joints. "Did you see Jorge?" He was nodding along with them. "He's the captain. His priority is crew safety. Those megalodons weren't aggressive toward the Nautilus until we interfered. The matriarch was disciplining the juvenile, not hunting us." I tried sitting up straighter, but my body protested. "They're going to organize a containment operation at the Whale Fall site. We can't let them destroy what could be the most significant marine biology discovery of the century." Sky leaned forward. "What do you suggest we do?" "You're in no condition to." The door opened, and Amelia stepped in carrying a clipboard. Her eyes darted to the hallway before she closed the door behind her. "They've posted someone outside," she said quietly. "An escort to make sure you stay put until they've processed everything." She made air quotes around the word escort. For my protection? I asked. That's what they're saying. She checked my monitors, making notes. You've got a Navy officer and someone who looks like Secret Service. They're taking shifts. I looked between Sky and Amelia. When are they deploying? I heard the naval commander mention 48 hours, Amelia replied, adjusting my IV. They're waiting for some ship to reach the coordinates. 48 hours. The knowledge sat heavy in my chest. 2 days until they would potentially destroy a living population of megalodons that had survived for millions of years. I need to get out of here, I said. You have DCS, Sky reminded me. You need the hyperbaric treatments. I've had 3 sessions. My oxygen levels are up to 92%. I can sign myself out. Amelia shook her head. Dr. Sanchez wouldn't approve that, and those guys outside certainly won't. Then I won't ask for approval, I said. I need to talk to Travis. He'll have contacts who can help us stop this. Sky and Amelia exchanged looks. What? I asked. Nothing, Sky said. It's just you nearly died, Logan. You still look terrible. Thanks. You know what I mean. Leaving now is risky. I gestured toward the door. What's happening out there is bigger than me. We've discovered a living population of megalodons. Do you understand what that means for marine biology? For evolutionary science? I lowered my voice. They've adapted to extreme depths. That's why no one's seen them for millions of years. And now the military wants to bomb them back into extinction before we can study them. Amelia checked her watch. If you're serious about this, shift change is in 20 minutes. The new guy takes about 5 minutes to get his coffee before he comes up. That would give us a window. I looked at her, surprised. She shrugged. I was pre-med at Berkeley during the protests. I know how to get around authority when needed. Sky crossed her arms. This is a terrible idea. Maybe, I agreed. But can you live with yourself if you do nothing? 30 minutes later, I was shuffling down the service corridor of San Diego Maritime Medical Center, dressed in scrubs Amelia had procured. My body protested every step, but determination pushed me forward. Sky had reluctantly agreed to create a distraction at the nurse's station, while Amelia helped me navigate the back way out. You sure Travis will meet you? Amelia asked, supporting me with one arm. He texted back. He's waiting in his car. I gripped the wall as a wave of dizziness hit me. I'm fine, I insisted before she could comment. You're not fine, she said. But I understand why you're doing this. We reached the service elevator. Amelia swiped her ID card and the doors opened. If anyone asks, I'll say you threatened me, she said with a small smile. Thanks, Amelia. I saw the footage, she replied. That creature looked at you. There was something there. Intelligence. I've worked with marine mammals. I know recognition when I see it. The elevator doors opened to the basement level. Amelia guided me through storage areas until we reached a loading dock where deliveries came in. Travis said he'd be in the north parking lot, I said, checking the text again. That's about 200 feet that way, she pointed. Can you make it? I nodded, though I wasn't completely sure. Go back before they notice you're missing too. Good luck, Dr. Jacobs. She handed me a small bag. Your wallet, phone, and a few medical supplies. You'll need to change the bandage on your arm tonight. With a final nod, she disappeared back into the building. The evening air was cool as I made my way slowly across the parking lot. Every step sent pain through my knees. The dizziness came and went, but the urgency of our situation kept me moving forward. I spotted Travis's ancient Volvo idling near the edge of the lot. Making my way over, I tapped on the passenger window. He jumped, then quickly unlocked the door. Jesus, Logan, he said as I collapsed into the seat. You look like death. Nice to see you too. He pulled out of the parking lot, checking his mirrors nervously. Are they following us? Don't think so. They probably haven't noticed I'm gone yet. Travis navigated through evening traffic, heading toward the university. His fingers tapped anxiously on the steering wheel. I can't believe you checked yourself out with decompression sickness, he said. That's incredibly dangerous. They're planning to drop depth charges on the site, Travis, in less than 48 hours. His fingers stopped tapping. You're sure? I heard them discussing containment protocols. The DoD representative was talking about national security risks. Travis drove in silence for a moment. The footage Sky sent me, it's extraordinary. Beyond anything we could have imagined. If they destroy these creatures before we can properly document them. Exactly. We arrived at the university campus. Most buildings were dark, but a few graduate students wandered between the science buildings. Travis parked behind the marine biology department. "Can you walk?" he asked, eyeing me with concern. "Not quickly, but yes." He helped me out of the car and into the building, using his faculty ID to get us through after hours. The hallways were quiet, our footsteps echoing on the polished floors. We took the elevator to the 4th floor, where Travis's office was located. "I've been analyzing the footage frame by frame," he said as he unlocked his office door. "What you captured is revolutionary." His office looked like an academic explosion had occurred. Papers covered every surface. Books were stacked in precarious towers, and 3 computer monitors displayed different sections of the megalodon footage. I lowered myself carefully into a chair while Travis closed the blinds and locked the door. "How much does the university know?" I asked. "Nothing yet. I've kept this completely quiet as you requested." He sat at his computer. "But Logan, this discovery changes everything we know about marine evolution." He pulled up enhanced stills from the footage. The matriarch's enormous form filled the screen, her ancient eyes staring directly at the camera. "Look at the gill structure," he said, zooming in. "It's modified from what we see in the fossil record. The slit pattern suggests adaptation for more efficient oxygen extraction at extreme depths." I leaned forward, ignoring the pain in my shoulders. "The coloration is different too." "Yes," Travis said excitedly. "Much darker than we would expect based on fossil pigment analysis. And the dermal denticles appear to have a different pattern, probably an adaptation to the cold and pressure." "They've evolved," I said simply. "While we thought they were extinct, they were adapting to the deep trench environment." Travis nodded, clicking through more images. "The proportions are slightly different too. The tail structure suggests more powerful but efficient swimming, conserving energy in an environment where food might be scarce." I pointed to an image of the juvenile. "What about the behavior? The interaction between the matriarch and the juvenile wasn't predatory." "No, it wasn't." Travis brought up the sequence showing the matriarch grasping the juvenile. "This is absolutely fascinating. She's exhibiting corrective behavior. Look at the pressure she's applying. Just enough to control, not to injure. This suggests complex social structures we never imagined in prehistoric sharks." The way she held it, it reminded me of how mammals discipline their young. Travis nodded enthusiastically. "This is unprecedented social behavior for sharks. Even modern great whites don't show this level of parental care." I rubbed my temples, trying to keep my focus through the pain. "We need to stop them from bombing the site. These creatures deserve to be studied, not destroyed." "I've been making calls to colleagues who might help," Travis said, "but many are hesitant to challenge a military decision, especially with the public safety angle they're sure to use." A knock at the door made us both freeze. Travis approached cautiously. "Who is it?" "Jorge Chandler." My stomach dropped. Had he come to take me back to the hospital, to ensure the government's plans proceeded without interference? Travis looked at me questioningly. I nodded reluctantly. When Travis opened the door, Jorge stepped in quickly, closing it behind him. His captain's bearing seemed diminished somehow, his shoulders tense. "You shouldn't have left the hospital," he said to me without preamble. "I couldn't stay and do nothing." Jorge looked between us, then at the images on the screens. "I figured you'd come here. Are you going to report me?" I asked. He was silent for a moment. "No." That caught me by surprise. "Why not?" Jorge paced the small, open area of the office. "Because I'm not comfortable with what they're planning. The Naval Commander Harrington was talking about dropping a series of depth charges directly on the Whale Fall site." "You seem to agree with them at the hospital," I pointed out. "I have responsibilities to my crew and ship. I had to appear cooperative." He stopped pacing. "But destroying these creatures without proper study feels wrong." I studied his face, looking for deception, but saw only genuine concern. "There's something else you should know," Jorge continued. "Something classified that I'm risking my career by telling you." Travis and I exchanged glances. Jorge lowered his voice, even though we were alone. 6 years ago, a naval attack submarine went missing in that same trench, the USS Barracuda. Official report says it was mechanical failure, but I had friends on that crew. "You think the megalodons were involved?" Travis asked. "I don't know," Jorge admitted. But the timing of the disappearance and the location can't be coincidental. What I do know is that whatever happened was serious enough that the area was designated a no-go zone for Navy operations. Until now, I let this information sink in. If the Barracuda encountered these creatures, then the military has known about them for years, Travis finished. Or at least suspected, Jorge corrected. No survivors means no confirmed sightings, but it would explain why they're so quick to launch a containment operation rather than a research mission. My mind raced through the implications. The trench is over 30 miles long and descends to depths we've barely explored, Travis said. If the megalodons have adapted to live down there could be an entire population. A breeding colony that's remained hidden for millions of years, I added. Evolutionary divergence from the extinct species we know from the fossil record. They've been down there, changing, adapting, completely removed from our knowledge. Jorge nodded. And now the military wants to eliminate them before the public finds out. We need to prevent this operation, I said firmly. We need more time to document them properly, to understand their behavior and ecology. How? Jorge asked. The USS Huntington is already heading toward the coordinates. They're not going to halt a naval operation because 3 scientists asked nicely. Travis turned to his computer. We need leverage, scientific consensus, public pressure, legal injunctions, anything to slow them down. I have contacts at the International Marine Protection Agency, I suggested. If we can get them involved, they might be able to challenge the operation on endangered species grounds. These animals aren't even officially discovered yet, Jorge pointed out. It's hard to claim endangered status for something the scientific community hasn't acknowledged exists. Then we need to make the discovery official, Travis said. I can call an emergency meeting of the department heads, present the evidence. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen, his expression darkening. What is it? I asked. Email from a colleague at the Naval Research Lab. Travis looked up, his face grave. The USS Huntington departed 2 hours ago with a full complement of depth charges. They're under orders to deploy within 48 hours. I gripped the arms of my chair, the pain in my joints momentarily forgotten. 48 hours, to save creatures that had survived for millions of years in the darkness of the ocean depths. 48 hours, to prevent the military from wiping out what might be the most significant marine discovery of our lifetime. The 3 of us looked at each other, the weight of what we were up against settling over the room. The screens behind Travis still showed the magnificent creature that had looked into my eyes through the viewport of the Nautilus. An ancient being that deserved our study and protection, not our destruction. We have work to do, I said. I stood on the dock beside the oceanographer, my joints still aching from the decompression sickness. The early morning fog hung heavy over San Diego Harbor, obscuring the tops of the distant cranes. Each breath of the salt air sent a dull throb through my chest, a persistent reminder of what happened at the whale fall site. You sure you're up for this? Travis asked, adjusting his glasses as he studied me with open concern. I nodded, watching as crew members loaded equipment onto the research vessel. The oceanographer wasn't as sleek as some modern research vessels. Her white hull showed patches of rust along the waterline, and her superstructure had seen better days. But Jorge had assured us she was reliable. More importantly, she was available on short notice, without the paperwork trail that might alert the military to our plan. I have to be, I said. Jorge appeared at the top of the gangway, clipboard in hand. His usual crisp captain's uniform had been replaced with practical maritime attire, dark pants, and a weatherproof jacket with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His face was tense, but determined as he waved us aboard. We're almost loaded, he said as we made our way up the gangway. Alan's finishing the final checks on the submersible. If we leave within the hour, we should reach the coordinates with time to spare. I followed him across the deck to where a submersible sat secured in a cradle. Unlike the sleek Nautilus I'd piloted before, this one was bulkier, with added protective plates welded over its original frame. Alan Thomas was on his back beneath it, a wrench in one hand as he tightened something underneath. Alan, Jorge called. Our passengers are here. Alan slid out, wiping his hands on a rag. Dr. Jacobs, good to see you vertical. He nodded at the submersible. I reinforced her as much as I could without compromising buoyancy or maneuverability. Added some extra plating to the viewport frame too. I ran my hand along the cool metal hull. Will it hold against something like the Juvenile? Alan hesitated. Probably. The reinforcement should withstand a glancing hit or investigatory bumps, but he looked me in the eye. If that matriarch decides to take a real swing at you, no submersible we have could withstand that kind of force. 80 feet of prehistoric predator hits with more power than we can engineer against on short notice. I appreciated his honesty. False confidence wouldn't help anyone down there. Dr. Jacobs. I turned to see Mason Sanchez walking up the gangway, medical bag in hand. His presence surprised me. We hadn't discussed him joining the expedition. What are you doing here, Mason? He set his bag down on the deck. Making sure you don't die. You're still recovering from severe DCS, and now you're planning to dive again. As your doctor, I should be reporting you to the medical board for this insanity. He shook his head. Since I can't stop you, I'm coming along to monitor your condition. Before I could respond, Amelia appeared behind him, carrying a duffel bag over her shoulder. Her hospital scrubs were gone, replaced by jeans and a navy blue sweater. Amelia too? I asked. She shrugged. Someone needs to help Dr. Sanchez keep you alive. Besides, I've got experience with trauma care if things go sideways. Jorge checked his watch. If everyone's aboard, we need to cast off. The USS Huntington left port last night. That sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my medical condition. The military vessel was already on its way to destroy what might be the most important marine discovery of our lifetime. How long until they reach the coordinates? Travis asked. At their top speed, about 20 hours, Jorge replied. We can make it in 18 if we push. I watched as crew members removed the gangway and prepared to cast off. Any word from your naval contacts? Jorge lowered his voice. I called in some favors. The Huntington might experience some unexpected mechanical issues that require reducing speed. Nothing serious enough to abort their mission, but enough to buy us a few more hours. Every minute counts, I said. As the oceanographer pulled away from the dock, I moved to the railing, watching the harbor slide past. My mind was on the depths below and what waited for us there. The matriarch's eye had held something I couldn't explain. An intelligence that defied conventional understanding of prehistoric creatures. I needed to see her again to document and study her before the military could destroy everything. 8 hours into our journey, I sat in the ship's lab with Mason and Travis, reviewing the footage from my previous dive. Mason had insisted on regular medical checks, monitoring my oxygen saturation and listening to my lungs every 2 hours. So far, he seemed cautiously satisfied that I wasn't about to collapse, though his frown deepened each time I winced from the lingering joint pain. Your oxygen levels are holding steady, he said, removing the pulse oximeter from my finger. But you're still showing symptoms of residual nitrogen in your tissues. Under normal circumstances, I'd have you in a hyperbaric chamber, not preparing for another deep dive. These aren't normal circumstances, I reminded him. Travis pointed at the screen where we'd frozen an image of the matriarch megalodon. Look at the ampullae of Lorenzini around her snout. They're far more developed than what we see in modern sharks. I leaned closer, studying the distinctive pores that formed a pattern around the shark's head. In modern sharks, these gel-filled canals served as electroreceptors, detecting minute electrical fields generated by other creatures. They were essential hunting tools, allowing sharks to find prey, even buried under sand. The pattern distribution is different, I noted. More concentrated, but also spreading further back along the lateral line. I'd hypothesized that her electromagnetic sensing abilities are significantly more advanced than modern species. Mason looked up from his medical equipment. Could that be how they've remained undetected for so long? Enhanced sensory awareness that lets them avoid human contact? It's possible, I said, and it might be something we can use. If her electroreceptors are that sensitive, they might also be vulnerable to overstimulation. This gave me an idea. I began sketching on a notepad, working through the concept of a device that could generate a targeted electromagnetic field. If the megalodon's sensory systems were as advanced as I suspected, such a device might function as a deterrent. Not harmful, but uncomfortable enough to keep them at a distance if needed. Alan, I called over the ship's intercom. Could you join us in the lab? I need your expertise on something. When Alan arrived, I explained my theory and showed him the rough design. He studied it, making occasional notes and asking technical questions about power requirements and field strength. "I can build this," he said finally. "Won't be pretty, but it should work. I'll need about 4 hours to put it together from components we have on board." "Do it," I said. "It could be our insurance policy down there." As Alan left to begin work, Jorge entered the lab. "We're making good time. My contact on the Huntington reports they've reduced speed due to an anomaly in their propulsion system. Their ETA at the coordinates is now 6 hours behind ours." "That's something, at least," Travis said. Jorge studied the footage on the screen. "So what exactly is the plan when we get there? We can't physically stop the military from deploying those charges." I stood up, ignoring the twinge in my knees. "We document everything. If we can prove the existence of a megalodon habitat, especially if it's a breeding ground, the scientific community will create enough pressure to halt the operation, at least temporarily." "And if the megalodons aren't there when we arrive?" Amelia asked from the doorway. It was the question I'd been avoiding. "Then we search. The whale fall was just a feeding site. They must have a primary territory nearby." "Based on what?" Jorge asked. I pointed to another screen where we'd been analyzing the audio recordings from the Nautilus. James helped me identify some unusual bioacoustic signals from my previous dive. They weren't just random sounds. They had patterns, repetitions. "I think they might be using some form of acoustic communication." Travis raised his eyebrows. "That would be unprecedented for a shark species." "So is a living megalodon," I countered. "We're dealing with creatures that have evolved in isolation for millions of years. Who knows what adaptations they've developed?" 10 hours later, the oceanographer slowed as we approached the coordinates. I stood on the bridge with Jorge, watching as the navigation system confirmed our position. According to the depth finder, we were hovering over an underwater trench that plunged to nearly 7,000 feet. "This is it," I said. "The whale fall should be directly below us." Jorge nodded to the communications officer. "Drop the acoustic array and begin scanning." I moved to the sonar station, watching as the operator deployed the sophisticated listening equipment. Within minutes, the speakers filled with the ambient sounds of the deep ocean, the creaks and groans of pressure changes, the distant calls of marine mammals, and the ever-present hum of the ocean itself. "Filter for the frequency range I specified," I instructed. The operator adjusted the settings, and the background noise fell away, leaving only sounds within the range I'd identified from the previous recordings. At first, there was nothing, and I felt my stomach tighten with disappointment. Then, faintly but distinctly, a pattern of clicks and low rumbles emerged. "There," I said, pointing to the waveform on the screen. "That's similar to what I heard before. Can you triangulate the source?" Jorge asked the operator. The technician worked the controls, correlating data from different points of the acoustic array. "It's coming from bearing 045, approximately 400 meters from our position. Depth approximately 6,300 feet. I turned to Jorge. "That's not exactly where the whale fall was. It's closer to the trench wall." "Are you still planning to go down?" he asked, his expression grave. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Alan's reinforced the submersible, and he's completed the electromagnetic deterrent device. Plus, we've got less than 5 hours before the Huntington arrives." Jorge didn't look convinced. "Mason wants to speak with you before you go. He's in the submersible bay." I found Mason inspecting the submersible, medical tablet in hand. He looked up as I approached, his expression leaving no doubt about his medical opinion. "Before you say anything," I began, "I know the risks, but I'm the only one who's seen them up close, the only one who made eye contact with the matriarch. If anyone has a chance of finding them again, it's me." Mason sighed. "At minimum, I want you wearing continuous monitoring equipment. I'll be tracking your vitals the entire dive. If I see any signs of recurring DCS or physiological distress, you surface immediately. No arguments, no delays." "Agreed," I said. He handed me a small device that attached to my wrist. "This monitors pulse, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, and core temperature. It transmits data to my tablet in real time." I strapped it on without protest. "Thank you, Mason, for coming and for not trying harder to stop me." "Oh, I tried," he said with a wry smile. "Jorge, Travis, even Amelia, I told them all this was medical madness. But they said you'd go anyway, with or without permission. At least this way we can monitor you. Alan approached with what looked like a modified underwater camera housing. Your electromagnetic deterrent, Doctor. I've set it to generate a field that should be perceptible, but not harmful to any creature with advanced electroreceptors. The battery will last about 6 hours. I took the device, examining the simple control panel. Excellent work, Alan. One more thing, he added, pointing to a red button protected by a plastic guard. Emergency setting generates a much stronger pulse, but it'll drain the battery in minutes. Only use it if you're in immediate danger. Travis joined us as I began the pre-dive checklist, scanning each system and testing each control. His normally energetic demeanor had turned solemn. I've been analyzing the topographical data of the trench, he said, unfolding a tablet showing a 3D bathymetric map. There are some interesting formations along the eastern wall that don't appear natural. What do you mean by don't appear natural? I asked, pausing my preparations. Symmetry where there shouldn't be any. Consistent spacing in what looked like openings. He pointed to several dark spots along the rendering of the trench wall. Could be nothing. Could be caves. Or something else. I finished. A new possibility forming in my mind. If the megalodons had survived millions of years without detection, they must have a primary habitat somewhere sheltered, somewhere hidden. Jorge stepped down into the bay, wearing a headset. The acoustic signals are getting stronger. Whatever is making them is active right now. I nodded, completing the final checks on the submersible systems. I'm ready. Remember, Mason said, tapping his tablet where my vital signs were already displayed. Any sign of distress and, you'll haul me back up, I know.
I secured the electromagnetic deterrent to the submersible's external mounting point and climbed inside. The reinforced hatch felt heavier than the Nautilus's had been, closing with a more substantial thud that was oddly reassuring. Through the intercom, Jorge's voice came through clearly. Comms check. Reading you? I confirmed. Submersible release in 30 seconds. I settled into the pilot seat, taking a deep breath as I ran my hands over the familiar controls. They weren't identical to the Nautilus, but close enough that muscle memory would serve me well. The reinforced viewport gave me a clear view of the submersible bay as the crane began to lift the craft. Releasing now, Jorge announced. I felt the brief sensation of hanging suspended, then the splash as the submersible hit the water. The descent began smoothly, the bright surface light fading as I dropped deeper into the blue. I switched on the external lights, illuminating the particles suspended in the water column. Passing 500 feet, I reported. Vitals stable, Mason replied. I checked the acoustic monitoring system Alan had installed, adjusting it to track the bioacoustic signals we detected from the surface. The indicator strengthened as I continued my descent, confirming I was moving in the right direction. 2,000 feet. Entering the thermocline. The temperature dropped noticeably as I passed through the boundary layer, where warm surface water gave way to the cold depths. The submersible creaked slightly with the pressure change, but all integrity indicators remained green. 4,000 feet, still following the acoustic signal, bearing now 42 degrees. Travis's voice came through. That's leading you directly toward those formations I showed you. The darkness outside was absolute now, broken only by the cone of light from the submersible's external lamps. Occasionally, bioluminescent creatures drifted through the beam, tiny points of blue and green light that winked out as quickly as they appeared. 5,000 feet, pressure stable. Every 100 feet brought back memories of my previous dive, of the terror and wonder of encountering the megalodons. My hands tensed on the controls, and I forced myself to relax. The reinforced submersible felt secure around me, though Alan's warning about the matriarch's power remained at the forefront of my mind. 6,000 feet. I should be approaching the whale fall site soon. Signal strength increasing, Travis confirmed. You're getting close to something. I adjusted my depth and heading, following both the acoustic signal and the coordinates of the previous dive. The darkness seemed to press against the viewport, as if the weight of the ocean itself was trying to peer inside. I have visual contact with the seafloor, I announced as the submersible's lights illuminated the bottom, moving toward the whale fall coordinates. The terrain below was barren mud interspersed with rock formations typical of deep ocean trenches. I navigated carefully, watching both for signs of the whale carcass and any movement in the surrounding water. "There it is," I said as the skeleton came into view. What had once been a massive blue whale was now reduced almost entirely to bones. The flesh, blubber, and organs that had created a feast for scavengers were gone, leaving behind a skeletal structure that rose from the sea floor like an ancient monument. A few Osedax worms still clung to the remaining tissue in the joints, but their once vibrant colonies had thinned dramatically. "The whale fall has been picked clean," I reported, maneuvering the submersible around the massive skull. No sign of the megalodons. "The acoustic signal?" Jorge asked. I checked the monitor. Still present. Stronger now. Coming from bearing 038. Not far from my position. I turned the submersible in that direction, following the gentle slope of the seafloor as it rose toward the trench wall. The terrain became rockier, with larger formations jutting up from the mud. The acoustic signal continued to strengthen. "I'm approaching the eastern wall of the trench," I said, adjusting the external lights to their maximum brightness. "There's significant geological activity here. Old lava formations, possibly from a seafloor vent system." As I drew closer to the wall, my lights revealed something that made me pause the submersible's forward movement. What at first appeared to be a shadow in the rock face resolved into a distinct opening, a dark mouth in the wall, perfectly arched and at least 30 feet high. "I'm seeing what appears to be a cave entrance," I reported, my heart rate picking up. "Large enough to accommodate something the size of the matriarch." "Are you getting any readings from inside?" Travis asked, excitement evident in his voice. I directed the submersible sensors toward the opening. Temperature differential detected. The water inside the cave is approximately 2 degrees warmer than the surrounding ocean. "Geothermal activity," Jorge suggested. "Possibly," I said, moving the submersible closer to the entrance. "But it could explain why they've chosen this location. Many sharks are drawn to slightly warmer waters." The acoustic signals were now pulsing with greater regularity, definitely coming from within the cave. I hovered at the entrance, shining the lights into the darkness beyond. The beam penetrated perhaps 50 feet before being swallowed by the blackness. "I'm going to enter," I decided. "Proceed with extreme caution," Jorge advised. "Maintain constant communication. And keep that deterrent device ready," Travis added. I navigated the submersible forward slowly, passing under the natural arch of the cave mouth. The temperature readout confirmed the slight warming of the water. The walls around me were smooth in places, rough in others, as if carved by both natural forces and something else. "I'm approximately 100 feet inside now," I reported. The passage continues, widening into what appears to be a larger chamber ahead. As I emerged from the tunnel into the chamber, my light swept across a sight that took my breath away. The cave expanded into a vast underwater cavern, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. But what caught my attention were the other tunnels, at least 6 additional passages branching off from this central chamber, each large enough for the matriarch to navigate with ease. "I found something," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's an entire tunnel system, multiple passages branching out from a central cavern." "Are you detecting any movement?" Jorge asked. "Nothing yet, but..." I paused as my sensors picked up a reading. "Wait, acoustic signals are coming from multiple directions now, and there's something else." I directed the submersible's lights toward the cavern floor. There, partially buried in the sediment, were hundreds of teeth. Megalodon teeth, far larger than any in the fossil record, and in various states of wear. Some appeared fresh, recently shed, while others showed signs of age. "I'm seeing megalodon teeth scattered across the cavern floor," I reported. "Not fossils. Recently shed teeth. This is a tooth drop site. Modern sharks regularly shed and replace their teeth throughout their lives. Finding a concentration of teeth like this suggested repeated visits over an extended period." "Logan," Travis's voice was thick with excitement. "You found it. Their lair." As I moved deeper into the cavern, my lights revealed more evidence. Scratch marks along the walls where enormous bodies had brushed against the rock. Depressions in the sediment that could only have been made by creatures of substantial size resting on the bottom. "This isn't just a random cave system," I said, the realization dawning on me. This is their habitat, a hidden ecosystem that's allowed them to survive for millions of years without detection. The tunnel network could extend for miles, connecting to other parts of the ocean trench. Any sign of the megalodons themselves? Jorge asked. Not yet, I replied, continuing to explore the central cavern. But they've been here recently, very recently. I navigated toward one of the branching tunnels, intending to investigate further, when something on my sensor display caught my attention. A subtle shift in water pressure behind me. I turned the submersible slowly, directing the lights back toward the tunnel through which I'd entered. For a moment, there was nothing but empty water. Then a shadow moved at the edge of visibility, a massive form gliding silently through the entrance to the cavern. The matriarch had returned. I froze, my hand hovering over the controls of the electromagnetic deterrent. The enormous megalodon paused just inside the chamber, her gills pulsing gently as she seemed to assess the intruder in her domain. Behind her, the smaller form of the juvenile appeared, staying close to its mother. "The megalodons are here," I whispered, though there was no need to lower my voice. "Both of them. They've just entered the cavern." "Are they showing aggressive behavior?" Mason asked, likely noting my elevated heart rate on his monitor. "No," I replied, watching in awe as the matriarch slowly circled the perimeter of the chamber, the juvenile following in her wake. "They appear cautious but not threatened. I think they recognize the submersible from our previous encounter." The matriarch completed her circuit of the cavern, then approached my position with deliberate movements. I held my position, not wanting to provoke a reaction by suddenly backing away. As she drew closer, her enormous head filled my viewport, and once again, I found myself looking directly into her eye. Ancient, intelligent, assessing. "She's directly in front of me," I reported, my voice barely above a whisper, "just watching." The great shark hovered there for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Then, with a powerful sweep of her tail, she turned and moved toward one of the other tunnels, the juvenile following close behind. Before entering, she paused, turning back as if to ensure I remained in place, then disappeared into the darkness of the passage. "They've moved into one of the branching tunnels," I said, releasing a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Logan," Jorge's voice was urgent now. "We've just received word that the USS Huntington has increased speed. They'll reach our position in 3 hours, not 5. I looked around at the cavern, at the evidence of an entire ecosystem hidden from human knowledge for millions of years. The matriarch had shown no aggression despite my intrusion into her territory. She'd assessed and accepted my presence, displaying a level of cognitive processing that defied everything we thought we knew about shark behavior. "I'm coming back up," I decided. I found what we needed. As I maneuvered the submersible back toward the entrance tunnel, I took one last look at the cavern. The tooth-scattered floor, the branching passages, the scratch marks along the walls, all evidence of a prehistoric species that had survived in secret while the world above believed them extinct. I'd found their hidden habitat. Now we had to save it. I pushed the control stick forward, halting my initial plan to ascend. The megalodon habitat was right in front of me. I couldn't leave now. This might be our only chance to document what we'd found before the military arrived. "Change of plans," I radioed to the surface. "I'm going deeper into the cave system." Amelia's voice crackled through the speaker. "Are you sure that's wise? Your oxygen levels are still fluctuating." "They're stable enough," I said, checking the gauge. "Mason, can you confirm?" There was a pause before Mason replied. "You're at 94%. Not ideal, but acceptable. How long do you need?" I calculated quickly. 1 hour, maybe less. I guided the submersible forward, adjusting the external lights to better illuminate the tunnel ahead. I need to document this ecosystem before the Huntington arrives. "Be careful," Sky chimed in. "We'll monitor from here." The narrow entrance widened as I eased the submersible through, my hands steady on the controls despite the pain still lingering in my joints. Rock formations slid past the viewport, their surfaces oddly smooth in places. I kept my distance from the walls, wary of scraping the hull against the stone. "I'm inside what appears to be a tunnel network," I reported. "The passage is widening considerably." "Depth reading?" Jorge asked. I checked the instruments, still at 6,215 feet, but the tunnel angles downward ahead. The submersible's lights caught something ahead, a soft blue glow that didn't come from my equipment. As I advanced further, the tunnel suddenly opened into a massive underwater cavern, and I gasped at what I saw. I don't even know how to describe it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've entered a cavern system that must be at least half a mile wide. The ceiling soared above me, peppered with stalactite-like formations. But what struck me most was the light. The entire cavern glowed with bioluminescence. Not just random patches, but entire colonies of organisms painting the rock walls in pulsing patterns of blue, green, and purple. I'm sending video feed now, I said, adjusting the external cameras. Are you getting this? It's coming through, Travis confirmed, his voice filled with wonder. This is extraordinary. Water temperature readings flashed on my console. Temperature reading at 76 degrees Fahrenheit, I said. That's nearly 40 degrees warmer than the surrounding ocean at this depth. There must be significant geothermal activity. I guided the submersible deeper into the cavern, cataloging everything I saw. The rock walls weren't uniform. They contained vents where heated water emerged, creating currents within the cavern. Around these vents clustered dense colonies of organisms I'd never seen before, tube-shaped creatures with feathery appendages that waved in the currents. I'm seeing what appears to be an entirely new class of extremophiles, I reported, using the submersible's sampling arm to take water readings. The ecosystem here is built around these thermal vents, similar to deep-sea smokers, but the species composition is nothing like our standard catalogs. The submersible's sensors began to pick up movement from one of the side passages. I turned to see a familiar silhouette, the juvenile megalodon we'd encountered earlier. Its 15 feet formed graceful as it swam through the water. Visual contact with the juvenile specimen, I said, heart racing with excitement rather than fear this time. It's entered the main cavern from a side passage. Are you in any danger? Jorge asked.
I don't think so. It hasn't noticed me yet.
I reached for the electromagnetic device Alan had built. I'm activating the EMF repulsion system now. I switched on the device, which emitted a specific electromagnetic field designed to interfere with the shark's ampullae of Lorenzini, the specialized sensory organs that allowed it to detect electrical fields from prey. If Alan's calculations were correct, it would make the submersible effectively invisible to the shark's most sensitive detection system. The juvenile swam past, seemingly unaware of my presence. It moved with purpose, heading toward another passage on the far side of the cavern. The EMF device appears to be working, I reported. The juvenile isn't showing any signs of detecting me. Fantastic, Travis replied. Can you follow it safely? I considered the options. The submersible was smaller than the juvenile, and with the EMF device working, it shouldn't notice me. I'll maintain a safe distance, but yes, I think I can track its movement. I engaged the thrusters at minimal power, creating as little disturbance in the water as possible. The juvenile continued through the cavern, occasionally snapping at smaller fish that darted away from its approach. I followed at about 30 m back, just close enough to keep it in view without risking detection. The passage the juvenile entered was narrower than the main cavern, but still easily wide enough for the submersible. As we progressed deeper into the tunnel system, I noted more unique features. Rock walls scored with deep grooves that looked suspiciously like the marks left by massive bodies squeezing through tight spaces over many years. I'm seeing evidence of regular megalodon traffic through these tunnels, I said. The rock walls show distinctive abrasion patterns consistent with large bodies passing through repeatedly. The temperature continued to rise as we moved deeper, now reading 82 degrees. The bioluminescence grew more intense as well, providing enough natural light that I could reduce the submersible's external lights to minimum. After approximately 5 minutes of careful pursuit, the tunnel began to widen again. The juvenile swam faster, and I increased power to keep pace. I think we're approaching another large cavern, I reported, watching the sonar readings expand outward. The tunnel is opening into a much larger space ahead. What I saw next made me forget to breathe. The juvenile entered an enormous central cavern that dwarfed the first one we'd passed through. This underwater cathedral must have been at least a mile in diameter, with a domed ceiling rising hundreds of feet above. But it wasn't the size that left me speechless. It was what filled it. Oh my God, I whispered, forgetting momentarily that the team could hear me. What is it? Sky asked urgently. What do you see? I struggled to form words. my scientific mind racing to process what my eyes were seeing. Not just two. I finally managed. There's a population. I count at least 7 distinct megalodon specimens, multiple juveniles of varying sizes, and 3 adults, maybe more. The juvenile I'd been following joined 2 others of similar size, the trio engaging in what appeared to be play behavior, circling and nipping at each other without aggression. Near the cavern floor, 2 adults, approximately 60 feet in length, patrolled slowly, their massive forms casting shadows in the bioluminescent light. "I'm recording everything," I assured the team, making sure all cameras were functioning. "This isn't just a habitat, it's a nursery, a breeding ground. This species hasn't gone extinct. They've been here all along, isolated from the world's oceans for millions of years." I maneuvered the submersible to a ledge on the cavern wall, where I could observe without being in their swimming paths. From this vantage point, I had an unobstructed view of the entire ecosystem. "The central cavern contains a complete food web," I noted, watching smaller fish swarm near thermal vents. "There are multiple trophic levels, small prey fish, medium predators, and the megalodons at the apex. This is an entire ecosystem that's evolved in isolation." "Can you estimate how many megalodons in total?" Travis asked, his voice trembling with scientific excitement. I scanned the cavern methodically. At least 8 distinct individuals visible now, 3 full adults ranging from 60 to 80 feet, and 5 juveniles at various growth stages. Based on the size of this cavern system and the biomass required to support apex predators, my guess is there could be more we're not seeing.
As I observed, I noticed something remarkable. A series of smaller caverns branching off from the main space, some containing what appeared to be nesting sites. One juvenile, smaller than the others, remained close to one of these alcoves, not venturing far into the open water. "I'm seeing behavior that suggests these may be territorial animals with defined social structures," I reported. "The smallest juvenile is keeping to a specific area, possibly indicating parental boundaries." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was an evolutionary miracle. A population of megalodons had survived here, adapting to this isolated environment for millions of years after the species was thought to have gone extinct. "The water chemistry readings are fascinating," I continued, examining the data streaming across my monitors. "High mineral content, elevated carbon dioxide levels compared to the open ocean, but oxygen rich enough to support large predators. The geothermal activity must create upwellings that continually refresh the water." Something changed in the cavern's atmosphere. The juveniles that had been playing suddenly broke apart, moving quickly toward the edges of the space. The adult megalodons changed their swimming patterns, becoming more alert. "Something's happening," I said. "Their behavior just changed dramatically." Then I saw her. The matriarch, emerging from a large tunnel on the opposite side of the cavern. Even from this distance, I recognized her immediately. 80 feet of ancient predator, her massive form moving through the water with impossible grace. The other adults gave her space as she entered, a clear indication of her dominant status. I held my breath as her course changed. She was swimming directly toward me. "The matriarch has spotted me," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "She's approaching the submersible." "Get out of there," Jorge commanded. "Use the thrusters. Full power." "No," I replied, watching the enormous shark draw closer. "She's not showing aggression. Her pectoral fins aren't lowered. Her approach is steady, not accelerating." The matriarch closed the distance between us with powerful sweeps of her tail. She stopped just meters from the viewport, her enormous head filling my field of vision, braced for impact. My hand hovering over the emergency controls, but something told me to weigh. One eye, black as the deep ocean and larger than my head, stared directly at me. In that moment, I felt something I couldn't explain. A connection, a sense of being recognized. "She remembers me," I whispered. "From our first encounter. She knows who I am." The matriarch hovered there, her gills pulsing rhythmically as she examined the submersible. There was intelligence in that gaze, not just animal instinct, but something more complex. After several long seconds, she moved slightly to one side, as if inviting me to look past her. Beyond, I could see more clearly into one of the alcoves she had emerged from. Inside was what I can only describe as a nesting area. a depression in the cavern floor filled with what appeared to be shed teeth and bone fragments. And in the center, barely visible in the bioluminescent light, I could make out several shapes that could only be megalodon pups, each perhaps 5 feet long. "They're breeding," I said in awe. "This isn't just a population that survived. They're actively reproducing. I can see what appears to be recently born pups." The radio crackled, and Jorge's voice came through, cutting off my scientific reverie. "Logan, you need to head back immediately." His tone made my blood run cold. "The Huntington has arrived on site. They're preparing to deploy depth charges within the hour." "What?" I tore my eyes away from the matriarch to check the ship's clock. They weren't supposed to arrive for at least another 6 hours. "They pushed their engines to the limit. Our Navy contact just radioed. They're preparing the charges now and mapping drop points. They're targeting the exact coordinates of that cave system." I looked back at the matriarch still hovering before me, at the juveniles swimming in the distance, at the pups in their nesting ground. This wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was an entire species that had cheated extinction, surviving in this hidden sanctuary for millions of years. And now, because of human fear and military protocol, they faced annihilation. "I'm not leaving," I said, my decision instant and unshakable. "If those charges detonate anywhere near this cavern system, it will collapse. The shockwaves alone will kill most of the megalodons, and the survivors will be forced into the open ocean where they'll be hunted down." "You can't stay down there," Mason interjected. "Your oxygen recycling system only has 40 minutes left." "Then I have 40 minutes to figure out how to stop this," I replied. The matriarch continued to watch me, her enormous eye reflecting the lights of my submersible. I had the unsettling feeling that she understood what was happening, that she sensed the danger approaching her family. "Jorge, can you contact the Huntington?" I asked. "Tell them we have a researcher still down here. They can't drop those charges with personnel in the impact zone." "Already tried," Jorge replied grimly. "They've requested immediate evacuation of all civilian personnel from the area. They're giving us 30 minutes to clear out before they establish a 5-mile exclusion zone." "What about the video feed? The evidence of what's down here?" "Travis is compiling it now, but it won't matter if they've already made the decision to proceed. Military operations like this don't stop for scientific discoveries." I stared at the matriarch, my mind racing through options. These creatures had survived the KT extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs. They'd adapted to changing oceans, retreating to this hidden sanctuary when their kind disappeared from the rest of the world. They'd evolved intelligence and complex social behaviors, and now they would be destroyed because humans had discovered them. "I need more time," I said. "There has to be a way to stop this." I watched as the matriarch slowly turned away from my submersible, swimming back toward her pups with powerful sweeps of her tail. The message seemed clear. She was returning to protect what was hers. "Jorge," I said, my voice firm with resolve, "tell the Huntington commander that I'm not leaving this site. If they drop those charges, they'll be killing a U.S. citizen along with these creatures." I had to stay. There was no way I'd leave these creatures to die. The military's plan to drop depth charges would destroy not just this newly discovered ecosystem, but potentially an entire species that had somehow survived extinction. I needed to find a way to warn them, to somehow communicate the danger. An idea formed in my mind. Something desperate, probably futile, but it was all I had. "Jorge," I said into the radio, "I need to try something. I'm shutting down all non-essential systems." "What?" "No, your oxygen is already..." "Just listen. I'm keeping life support and communications online, but I'm killing everything else. Lights, external sensors, propulsion, everything." "Logan, what are you doing?" Sky's voice now, concern evident. "The research data we collected on our previous expeditions, the recordings from the blue whale migration study last year. Do we still have them in the ship's system?" Travis answered. "Yes, of course. They're archived in the primary database. I need you to transmit them to my submersible. The full spectrum recordings, especially the contact calls between mothers and calves." "You want whale songs?" Travis asked, confusion in his voice. "Yes, send them immediately. I think I can use the external speakers to broadcast them." There was a pause before Jorge responded, "Sending the files now." But Logan, you realize the Huntington is already preparing to deploy. You've got less than 30 minutes of oxygen left. I know, just send the files. While I waited, I methodically powered down every system I could spare. The external lights went dark first, plunging me into the blue-green glow of the bioluminescent cavern. Then the propulsion systems, the sample collection equipment, even the external temperature sensors. The cabin grew quieter as each system shut down, until all I could hear was my own breathing and the soft hum of life support. The console pinged as the audio files arrived. I quickly scrolled through them, selecting the clearest recordings of whale vocalizations, particularly those between mother and calf. If there was any chance of communicating with these creatures, I suspected it would be through sounds they might recognize from their marine environment. I connected the files to the external speaker system, originally designed for sonar pings and scientific sampling. It wasn't meant for this purpose, but it would have to work. I took a deep breath and hit play. The low, haunting calls of blue whales filled the water around my submersible. I couldn't hear them directly, but I could feel the vibrations through the hull as the powerful sounds propagated outward. I adjusted the volume, making it loud enough to travel, but not so overwhelming that it might seem threatening. At first, nothing happened. The matriarch remained where she was, hovering near her pups. Then, slowly, she turned toward me. "She's responding," I said into the radio. "The matriarch is looking at my submersible." "Logan, your oxygen is at 19 minutes, Mason warned. I didn't answer. I was transfixed by the massive shark as she glided toward me with slow, deliberate movements. Her size never ceased to amaze me. This creature represented millions of years of evolution, a living fossil that had survived when the rest of her kind had vanished from the planet. She circled the submersible once, then twice, her massive body blocking the blue glow of the cavern with each pass. I switched to a different whale song, this one a series of calls between a mother blue whale and her calf. The matriarch paused directly in front of my viewport, close enough that I could see the texture of her skin, the scars that mapped her long life in the deep. Her eye, that ancient, intelligent eye, fixed on me again. There was something in that gaze that defied simple animal instinct. Something that made me certain she was assessing me, calculating, thinking. "Amelia," I said, "I'm going to try something else. I need you to record everything the external camera captures." "Already recording," she confirmed. "But Logan, the military vessels are deploying personnel to our ship right now. We can't stall them much longer." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Tell the others to keep them busy as long as possible. I just need a few more minutes." I switched the audio to the distress calls of whales, the sounds they made when under threat. The matriarch's body language shifted immediately, a subtle tension that spread from her head down her massive length. "She recognizes distress calls," I said. "She knows these are warning sounds." While continuing the broadcast, I raised my hands to the viewport where she could see them. I pointed upward repeatedly toward the surface, then spread my fingers wide and brought my hands downward in a mimicry of an explosion. "Up! Danger! Explosion!" I repeated the gestures, feeling ridiculous but desperate. The matriarch remained motionless, watching. Again, I pointed up, then mimed the explosion, this time adding a sweeping motion toward the deeper tunnels away from where we knew the charges would be dropped. "Up! Danger! Go away." "Logan, what are you doing?" Jorge asked. "Trying to warn her," I said, not taking my eyes off the matriarch. "Trying to tell her to move deeper into the tunnels, away from where the charges will hit." "That's," he began, but didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to say it was crazy. I knew it was. I repeated my crude sign language once more. This time, the matriarch did something unexpected. She turned, swimming a few yards away, then back to the viewport. Then she did it again, moving away, then returning. Was she mimicking my instruction to move? "She's responding to my gestures," I said, my voice tight with emotion and disbelief. "I think she understands." "Logan," Mason cut in, 15 minutes of oxygen. You need to start your ascent now." I looked at the matriarch one last time and made the gestures again, putting everything I had into communicating the danger. Then, remarkably, she turned and swam to the group of juveniles. With powerful sweeps of her tail, she guided them toward one of the deeper tunnels. The other adults followed, the entire group disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel system. "They're leaving," I reported, my voice barely a whisper. They're all heading deeper into the tunnel network, away from the primary cavern. Logan, your ascent. Now. Mason's voice was no longer calm. I pulled the emergency ascent lever, feeling the sudden jolt as the ballast tanks emptied. The submersible shot upward through the tunnel I'd entered through, the G-forces pushing me back into my seat. Ascending, I confirmed. ETA to surface approximately 7 minutes. The military is already aboard, Jorge reported. They're demanding to know what we found and why you haven't surfaced yet. As the submersible rose through the dark water, I processed what I'd just witnessed. Had the matriarch actually understood my warning? Or had it been coincidence, some other factor driving her to relocate her family at that precise moment? 5,000 feet, I reported. 4,000, 3,000. The submersible burst through the surface with a spray of water, bobbing violently in the open ocean. Through the viewport, I could see the oceanographer nearby, and beside it, the imposing silhouette of what had to be the USS Huntington. Smaller boats were positioned between the vessels, and figures in naval uniforms were visible on our deck. The hatch above me opened, and a face appeared. Not one of my crew, but a stern-looking man in a naval officer's uniform. "Dr. Jacobs, I'm Commander Reeves. You need to come with me immediately." I unstrapped myself and climbed out, my joints stiff from the confined space. The brightness of daylight was disorienting after hours in the bioluminescent cavern. As soon as I reached the deck of the research vessel, I was surrounded by military personnel. Jorge, Amelia, and Travis stood nearby, looking tense. Sky rushed forward but was held back by a naval officer. "Where is the target species?" Commander Reeves demanded. "Our sonar shows nothing at the coordinates." I took a moment to catch my breath. I found them, an entire population, at least 8 individuals, including juveniles. They've created a habitat in an underwater cave system connected to the trench. "Show me," he ordered. Amelia stepped forward with a tablet. "We have the footage here, Commander. Live feed from Dr. Jacobs' submersible." She played the video showing the cavern with its bioluminescent organisms, and then the megalodons. First the matriarch, then the others, including the vulnerable pups. Commander Reeves watched with a stone face, but I could see his eyes widened slightly at the sight of the massive creatures. "Where are they now?" he asked when the video ended. "They've moved deeper into the tunnel system," I said, "away from the primary cavern." "How convenient," one of the other officers remarked. "Right before we arrived to neutralize them," Jorge intervened. "Commander, these creatures have survived for millions of years in isolation. They've created a stable ecosystem that poses no threat to surface operations as long as they remain undisturbed." Commander Reeves wasn't moved. "We have our orders. The depth charges will be deployed as planned." "You can't do that," I protested. "You haven't seen what I've seen. These aren't just animals. They showed signs of complex cognition." The matriarch understood my warnings. The commander looked at me with skepticism. "Dr. Jacobs, you've suffered from severe decompression sickness recently. Your perception might be compromised." "Play him the recording," I said to Amelia. "Show him how she responded." Amelia queued up the section of video, showing my hand gestures and the matriarch's reaction. The footage was clear, my signals, followed by her movements, guiding her family away. The commander watched, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to one of his officers. "Proceed with deployment, as ordered." "No," I stepped toward him, only to be restrained by 2 naval personnel. "You can't do this. It's scientific genocide." But my protests were ignored. Through the next agonizing 20 minutes, we watched as the military prepared and then deployed their depth charges. The underwater explosions sent shockwaves through the water that we could feel even on the surface. After the final charge detonated, Commander Reeves ordered immediate sonar scanning of the area. We all stood in tense silence as the results came in. "No signatures detected," reported one of the technicians. "Area appears clear of large biological entities." "That's not possible," said the commander. "Scan again. Wider radius." The second scan produced the same result. No megalodons detected in the vicinity of the charges. "They survived," I said, relief washing over me. "They moved through the tunnel system to a safer area, just as I suggested to the matriarch." Commander Reeves turned to me, his face hard. "Where did they go, Dr. Jacobs? Where exactly are these creatures now? I met his gaze steadily. I don't know their exact location. The tunnel system could extend for miles in any direction. But what I do know is that what we witnessed changes everything. That matriarch understood my warning. She interpreted a threat and took action to protect her family. "You're anthropomorphizing," one of the scientists accompanying the military team said dismissively. "No," Travis interjected. "I've studied marine predator behavior for decades. What we saw goes beyond instinct or coincidence. The timing and specificity of the response strongly suggests cognitive processing." I nodded, grateful for Travis's support. These creatures aren't just prehistoric monsters. They're highly evolved, intelligent beings that have survived by adapting and learning. They deserve study and protection, not destruction. The commander looked unconvinced, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes. My orders were to neutralize a threat to maritime operations and national security. "And how is that threat neutralized if you don't even know where they are?" Jorge asked. "By determining their new location," the commander replied coldly. I stepped forward. "I won't help you find them to kill them. None of us will. What I witnessed down there wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was communication between species. Do you understand what that means?" These creatures showed signs of intelligence comparable to marine mammals. They understood danger. They protected their young. They responded to communication attempts. The military personnel exchanged glances, clearly not having expected this outcome. "Commander," Amelia said, her voice calm but firm, "we've documented everything. The footage of Dr. Jacobs' interaction with the matriarch is already being transmitted to our university servers and multiple scientific institutions. If these creatures are destroyed without proper study, it will represent one of the greatest scientific losses in history." The commander's radio crackled. After listening to the message, he turned to his team. "Continue scanning all underwater formations within a 5-mile radius. I want those creatures located." Then he faced me. "Dr. Jacobs, you and your team will remain on board until this operation is complete. If we verify your claim that these creatures have relocated rather than been eliminated, we'll reassess the situation." It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve. As the military personnel moved away to continue their work, I joined my team near the stern of the ship. "Do you really think she understood you?" Sky asked quietly. I gazed out at the ocean, thinking about that ancient eye looking back at me through the viewport. "Yes," I said finally, "I do. Not in the way we understand language, but she grasped the concept of danger and the need to relocate. That's not just instinct, that's processing, decision-making." "If you're right," Travis said, "we're looking at a complete reevaluation of predator cognition. These creatures have had millions of years to evolve in isolation. Who knows what capabilities they've developed?" I nodded slowly. "Exactly. And that's why they need to be studied, not destroyed. If they really did understand my warning, if there was actual cross-species communication happening down there, then everything we thought we knew about these animals has to change." We stood in silence, watching the military vessels conducting their search. I knew the megalodons were safe for now, hidden deep in their tunnel system, but this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would determine whether humanity would learn from these magnificent survivors or destroy them out of fear and ignorance.